There is something wrong with the signal. It came through the void net like a whisper in a sealed tomb, broken, flickering, distorted beyond the usual warp interference. But it had structure, a distress call, ident code, timestamp. The tech adepts on Watchpoint 717 ran it through every filtration auger they had, layer by layer, filtering the static, the warp burn, the dissonant echoes. Finally, after hours of deciphering and spectral rebalancing, the message emerged. Faint, but undeniable. This is the Imperial vessel Aethon's Wrath. Coordinates transmitting. Crew in distress. Repeat, Aethon's Wrath, requesting immediate recovery. And then it ended, abrupt, cold, like a candle snuffed out mid-word. The timestamp was what shook them the most. It was dated M36.992, over 6 centuries ago. Welcome to Voidborn Terrors. If you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more grimdark horror stories from the depths of the 41st millennium. This is the beginning of Cursed Ship in the Warp, a haunting saga of identity, memory, and the shadows that wait between stars. It's a trick, one of the Navy officers had said. He scoffed through a mouthful of recaf, but his eyes didn't match his voice. Some kind of leftover echo from the warp happens all the time, but the coordinates were precise. They pointed to an unmarked forgotten star system in the deep, cold reaches of the segmentum obscurus. There was no warp storm, no temporal flux, no anomaly on record, just a dead patch of black void. Cold, sterile, and utterly silent. Navi's Astra flagged it as a potential salvage recovery op and put out the order. A deep reach retrieval, high risk, high value. They asked for volunteers. I put my hand up before they even finished reading the mission brief. I still don't know why, only that the name Aethon's Wrath hit something inside me, like I'd heard it once as a child, or maybe dreamed it during a fever I couldn't remember. 2 weeks later, we made warp transition aboard the Magneticus Rex, a mid-range Mechanicus recovery bark retrofitted for deep salvage, hostile boarding, and full-scale derelict extraction. I was a systems monitor, Voxlink technician, mid-rank, low priority, forgettable, but I was there. And when we emerged from the warp into that silent system, the augers blinked to life. There she was, Aethon's Wrath, hanging in orbit like a ghost on string. No hull damage. No signs of fire, impact, or decay, not even scoring from warp storms or micrometeorites. She looked new, just floating. Lights glowing softly in the portholes, engines quiet, and waiting. We ran the standard sweeps. Every system came back strange. Power, active, but fluctuating as if something was drawing and releasing charge in timed intervals. Atmosphere, sealed, stable, and somehow still breathable. Biosigns, positive. That last one stopped us cold. There. Shouldn't be any bio readings, said Goran, our medici, shaking his head slowly. If this ship's been out here since M36, those people would be long dead. Bones, maybe, but not life. And he was right. But the scans didn't lie. Something was moving inside. Not just ambient heat or mechanical feedback. Movement, footfall signatures, pressure variants. Magos Derex, our lead tech priest, was poring over the data logs. He'd been trying to sync the ship's noosphere imprint with the Magneticus Rex for a deeper reading. Suddenly, he froze. His mechadendrites lashed against the console, sparking slightly as he slammed them down. The vessel is alive, he rasped through his Vox grill. Not operational, alive. We thought he was exaggerating. Mechanicus types are always dramatic about machine spirits, until the Vox system activated. It powered on, without command, and played back the last 10 seconds of our conversation, but in reverse, perfectly mirrored, syllable by syllable, like it had been recorded from inside the ship. I blinked and looked at the internal chronometers. The readouts didn't match. I checked again. Still wrong. Every time I looked, the time had shifted. Sometimes ahead by seconds, sometimes rewound by minutes. 1 second aboard felt like 5 stretched out, or like none had passed at all. The command came through, clear and simple. Board, retrieve logs, extract any survivors. I ran a final seal check on my void suit, whispered the standard rite of protection to the Omnissiah, even though my hands were shaking. Then I climbed into the boarding. Torpedo. The clamps hissed shut. The lights dimmed. The hum of the torpedo's internal capacitors echoed like a heartbeat in my ears. I looked out through the viewport just before launch. The Aethon's wrath was drifting slowly. Except she wasn't drifting anymore. She was turning, not by inertia, by intent, turning to face us. Impact. The torpedo struck hull and locked. The airlock engaged. Mechanisms clanged and hissed as seals fused and override systems activated. We breached the outer layer, stepped into the ship's main corridor, and the first thing we heard? A heartbeat. Low, steady, thudding through the deck, plating like it came from inside the metal. Alive, patient, like the ship had been waiting, like it knew we were coming, like it had been listening the whole time. We entered the Aethon's wrath through the forward starboard docking bay. The maglocks hissed as the airlock unsealed. The moment the hatch slid open, a wave of warm, stale air hit us, dense and heavy, as if it had been trapped inside for centuries, yet somehow still fresh enough to breathe. Warm. Not freezing, not sterile, not void-chilled like every other derelict we'd encountered in deep space. No sign of vented atmosphere, no frostbite residue on the hatch seals, no vacuum damage. The ship had atmosphere, and not just held in place by emergency sealants or backup life support systems. This air had been circulating, used, lived in. The boarding lights activated in staggered flickers as we made our way down the initial corridor. Each flicker illuminated brief glimpses of steel bulkheads, warning sigils, and status glyphs that still glowed faintly along the walls. Our footsteps echoed more than they should have. Aboard any normal vessel, the sound would have been swallowed by fabric, by bodies, by the white noise of systems running in tandem. Here, every step rang out like a bell toll. Behind me, tech priest Derex began whispering the rites of purity in a low, grating Binharic tongue. But the sound that came from his vox grill didn't match the words. It was off. Bent. As if the syllables had been pulled apart and stitched back together in the wrong order, like the machine spirit itself was twisting the sacred language into something else. Mediki Goran held up his auspex and scanned the corridor's air composition. Oxygen levels nominal, he muttered. Elevated ammonia, trace sulfur, faint organic, decay. I sniffed the air and winced. Smells like old blood, I said. He didn't argue, didn't even look at me, just nodded grimly. The internal cargo bay greeted us with silence, immaculate, unreal. Crates were still sealed and stacked in perfect symmetry. Cargo nets hadn't shifted or sagged. No mold, no rot, no dust layering the edges, even the cogitator. Panels along the bulkhead walls still pulsed, dim, sluggish, but undeniably alive with residual power. "This can't be right," said Ensign Kell. He moved slowly, watching the shadows as they might move back. "If this ship's been adrift for 600 years, where's the dust? Where's the corrosion? Where's anything?" No one answered, because no one wanted to say the obvious. Maybe it hadn't drifted. Maybe it had just arrived. We divided into 3 squads and began sweeping the primary corridors in formation. Standard protocol for salvage ops, but it didn't feel standard. I stayed close to Derex, partly out of duty, partly out of fear. The tech priest extended one of his mechadendrites along the wall, its tendrils twitching as it interfaced with the exposed conduit mesh. He whispered more Binharic into it, listening intently. Then he stopped, froze mid-step, His mechadendrite recoiled from the wall like it had touched something alive. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. He turned his head toward me, the red glow of his optic lenses flickering irregularly. "The machine spirit is conflicted," he rasped. "It believes it never left." "Left what?" I asked. Derex paused, then lifted his servo claw and began carving into the wall, not with haste, with ritual. He etched a spiral, then an eye, then teeth inside the eye. The meaning didn't need to be explained. Down the corridor, one of the squad leaders, Veln, called out through the vox. "We've got something." We rushed to regroup. There, nestled in the corner of a dim service alcove, was a crewman. He was sitting upright. His uniform was Imperial Navy issue, tattered, scorched, but unmistakable. His chest rose and fell, shallow. He was breathing. His eyes were wide open, unfocused, not blinking. He didn't react to our presence as we approached. Weapons came up. Goran moved in to scan him. The crewman's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Just dry motion, like a broken puppet. Goran activated his medical slate, capturing the motion, then ran it through vocal analysis and signal reversal. The result chilled us. "You shouldn't be here." Then the man spasmed violently and vomited a stream of thick black fluid onto the floor. He collapsed in seconds, pulse flatlined. Gone. "What the hell was that?" Someone whispered. Derex didn't even turn. "The ship remembered him," he said simply. Within the hour, we found 2 more. Same condition, same slack posture, same reversed speech. The second died before we could get close. The third smiled. Her lips curled into a grin, twisted and too wide. Then slowly, deliberately, she bit through her own tongue. Blood pooled as she choked on it. We couldn't save her. By then, no one wanted to. Finally, we reached the bridge. The massive doors loomed over us, sealed tight with no physical damage. Derex attempted to interface with the access panel. He input a sequence of override codes. Nothing. The panel stayed red. Then it flickered. Words began to scroll across it in pale white text. 4 words. "You were always here." Kel backed away instantly. "Nope, I'm done," he said. "We're leaving. This isn't a salvage op. This is a damn mausoleum." I wanted to agree. Every part of me did. But something was behind that door. We could feel it, pulsing, waiting, a rhythm beneath the metal, like a second heartbeat, like breath, like the ship wasn't just aware of us, but listening and expecting. There were bodies, more than a dozen, strewn through the halls like broken statues frozen mid-motion. Some reached for console keys, others curled in fetal positions, backs against walls. A few clutched each other, frozen in their final embrace. Mouths open in mid-scream or whisper. Their skin was gray, not the gray of old rot. Not the blackened hue of asphyxiation. Just wrong. An unnatural, still pallor that looked more like wax than flesh. Medici Goran crouched beside the nearest figure and began scanning. He ran the auspex 3 times, then drew a sample with a sterile syringe and examined it under his field scope. "No wounds," he muttered. "No blunt trauma, no plasma scarring, no signs of oxygen starvation or hemorrhage. Blood chemistry, inert, no clotting, just functionless." "What does that mean?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "It's like they weren't killed. It's like the bodies were turned off. Like the soul just walked out," I said. He didn't argue. None of us did. We moved carefully through the hall, checking each corridor, each bulkhead, each locked hatch. The bodies continued. 12, 13, 14. Crew uniforms from M36. Ident badges still clipped to lapels. We found the Medici log tucked inside a stasis-locked cabinet near the infirmary, still humming softly with power, still pristine, untouched by time, sealed in holy steel. Derex extracted it with slow, reverent precision, his servo claws trembling slightly. He plugged in his interface spike and began decoding. Then he let out a low mechanical hiss through his Vox grill. "Data confirms crew identity," he said. "Crew 119, Adeptus Navy Manifest, assigned to the Aethon's Wrath, recorded standard, M36.992. Goran furrowed his brow. "Then they've been dead 600 years. Derex's mechadendrites twitched. He shook his head. "No, the decay. The degradation index is low. Cellular breakdown only started within the last 10 hours. Maybe less." "That's impossible," someone whispered. But we were past the point of impossible. One of the bodies stood out. A female officer, lieutenant rank, was slumped beside a comms relay junction. She died sitting up, spine twisted awkwardly, eyes wide open. Her mouth was parted, like she'd been about to speak, and clutched in her hand. Tight. Enough to splinter her nails was a pick slate. Derex pried it free and handed it to me. I activated the playback. Her voice came through our earpieces, hoarse, tired, but calm. "We're still here. We never left the warp. Every attempt to jump brought us deeper, not forward, not out, just in. The ship changes. Our faces change. I woke up yesterday and didn't know my own name. If anyone finds this, leave. Don't try to help. It remembers us now, and it's learning to be us." Then static. Then another voice. Softer. Familiar. It was mine. Too late. My hands went cold. I dropped the slate without meaning to. We withdrew immediately. Fell. Back to a secure corridor near the maintenance cluster and set up a temporary field camp. Medici Goran initiated standard bio-purges and lit 2 canisters of purifying incense. Derex carved reinforcement litanies into the wall plating and began chanting binding rites. I just sat down and tried to breathe, tried to remember, because for a moment, just a flicker of time, I couldn't recall who had first agreed to the boarding op. Was it Kel? Was it Veln? Was it me? Had I volunteered? Or had I already been aboard? The question lingered. It wouldn't leave. During our third watch rotation, Veln snapped. He was sitting quietly, visor down, staring at his own reflection in the mirrored surface of a bulkhead. Then he started screaming, clawing at his helmet, at his own face, ripping the seals loose. He yelled that someone was wearing his skin, that his reflection wasn't his, that it blinked at the wrong time. We tried to subdue him. Goran moved in with a sedative injector. Veln bit him hard, drew blood. Then he grabbed Derex and leaned in, whispered something straight into his ear. The tech priest froze mid-step. For the first time since the mission began, his litany broke. I pulled Derex aside. "What did he say to you?" Derex's voice came out low, shaken. He said my designation string. From Mars. The one I deleted when I left the forges. The one no one should know. Not even me. "How?" I asked. Derex didn't respond. But his expression, his eyes behind that red optic glow, told me everything. He didn't want to know. We sealed Veln in an isolated chamber with no internal Vox feed. He laughed. For hours. 4 hours exactly. Then, silence, when we returned to check. He was gone. No breach in the bulkhead, no ruptured seals, no trace, only a message scratched roughly into the floor with what looked like a finger bone. "The name is not yours." Kel was next. He began speaking in reversed high Gothic, fluent, fast, and with a grammar none of us recognized. He described places we'd never been, spoke of missions we'd never received, gave names to dead people no one remembered. Then, he swore, absolutely swore, that he'd seen his mother walking the lower deck corridor. His mother. Dead 15 years ago in a hivequake on Scintilla. "I just want to talk to her," he begged. "I just want to see her again. Let me find her." We refused, he cried. Then, Like Veln before him, he started laughing. It echoed through the metal, like something else was laughing with him. Derex took readings. After 30 minutes, he looked up and said, "The ship is mimicking us, copying our words, our memories, our fears." I stared at him. "That makes no sense. It's a ship, Derex." He turned back toward the darkness behind the camp perimeter. "No," he said slowly. "It makes perfect sense. If it's not a ship at all, we should have left." Every single one of us felt it. That crushing sense of wrongness in our bones. After Veln vanished without a trace, and Kel began speaking in backward liturgies, even Mediki Goran, normally the most composed among us, said it aloud, "We need to go." But it was already too late. The airlocks wouldn't respond. Every override command returned with system failure tones. The locks were sealed from the inside, as if something didn't want us to leave. The command, "Deck," our one shot at manual override, remained locked down behind those massive bridge doors. We'd tried breaching them. Plasma cutters, servo tools, even a bypass through the wall's conduit grid, none worked, and worst of all, the Magneticus Rex, our recovery bark waiting in orbit, had stopped answering us. No Vox signal, no Auspex, ping, nothing. We tried again, and again. 3 times we sent the standard extraction protocol ping. Each time the Vox replied, but not with the message we sent. It played back our own words, but distorted. Each voice was ours, reversed, and altered. Slight word shifts, emotional changes. The third message chilled the air more than the void ever could. "Do not extract. We are the ship now." Derex stormed toward the Vox relay. His mechadendrites snaked out, running diagnostic sweeps while his mouth poured out. A steady stream of machine god blessings and sanctification mantras. But the longer he spoke, the more his voice faltered. Not because of fear, but because the Vox responded. It whispered static back at him, then fell silent. Dead. We were cut off. Alone in every way that mattered, and we weren't alone. We started hearing them around what we marked as Cycle 6. Footsteps, soft, dragging. Sometimes fast, always distant, always just out of sight. They echoed through the upper decks, sounded across the bulkheads, passed over grates above us. But we never saw anything, not at first. Then, one of the servitors we'd sent to Scout Deck 9 returned, dragging something behind it, a body, a woman. She wore faded void gear. The seals were ancient, the serials worn away. Her rank was illegible, no ident tags. Her limbs twitched occasionally, tiny, insect-like movements. Her mouth hung open, breathing shallow. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, dry as bone, but she was alive, sort of. Goran ran a scan. She's breathing, pulse present. But he hesitated, tapping his slate. She's not conscious. Her EEG is flat, no neural activity. I leaned closer, carefully listening. Her lips moved, barely. I activated the slate's audio capture. Her voice came through like wind sliding under a door. It never stopped walking. She repeated it, again and again, monotone, rhythmic. It never stopped walking. It never stopped walking. Derex moved to take a sample from her armor. He scraped along the edge, then checked the material against ship records. Aethon regimental pattern, he said. Late M36 production. Goran's eyes widened. Then she's... Derex nodded. Original crew. We attempted sedation. Goran administered the injection. Standard dose. Fast acting. But the fluid disappeared into her veins like it was never there. No change, no reaction. Then, without warning, she stood, fully upright, still sedated, still blank. Her eyes never blinked, and she started walking, just walked away. We tried to restrain her. Goran reached out and grabbed her arm, firm, practiced. She turned slowly and looked into his eyes. He recoiled instantly. His breath caught in his throat. He let go like he'd touched a hot plasma coil. "That wasn't her," he whispered. "We followed her, through corridor after corridor. She moved with eerie calm, not fast, not aggressive, just walking, as if retracing a path she'd walked thousands of times before, like she was reliving a memory embedded in steel. Then she stopped, at a junction where the lighting dimmed and someone stepped out of the shadows. Another figure, another walker, a man this time. Same dead eyes, same faded gear, same slow, mindless steps. Behind him, more, a dozen, then 2 dozen, all moving, all silent, all wearing the torn, decayed uniforms of a ship that should have died 600 years ago. We froze, not because of fear, but because we recognized some of them. Their faces. Some looked like us. Goran's hands trembled. "We're hallucinating," he muttered. "Warp sickness. Identity overlay. Neurological interference from the ship." Derex shook his head. "Cold. Certain. No. This isn't sickness. The ship is copying us." I swallowed hard. "No," I said slowly. "It's not copying. It's replaying us." We fell back in formation. Quick, quiet. We didn't run. We retreated, back to the medbay, one of the few rooms we could still secure. We sealed the hatches, bolted down, lit 3 incense units, and wrapped the interior in blessed cabling. But outside, the sealed door, one of them waited, a woman. Half her helmet fused into her skull, jaw hanging at a crooked angle. She stood motionless, watching. Not moving, just watching. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. And on the 3rd flicker, she was closer. No sound, no footfall, just closer. And then, gone, like she had never been there at all. I checked my body cam footage from the first hour aboard, frame by frame, searching for anything, some clue, some missed detail. And then I saw it, a hallway, empty, until I walked into frame, except I don't remember being there, not in that corridor, not at that time. I watched myself stare directly into the camera, blank, expressionless, not breathing, just watching, then turning and walking away. Our chronometers are lying to us. I first noticed it when trying to log the timestamp of our last failed contact with the Magneticus Rex. Standard protocol, record attempt, note elapsed mission time, and cross-reference with shipboard logs. The mission chronometer said we'd been aboard for 72 minutes. My personal chronopiece, synced before launch, displayed 9 hours, 43 minutes. Goran's medical slate read 18 minutes. Derex checked his internal time loop and announced flatly that we hadn't boarded yet. His count showed it was still 15 minutes before docking. We didn't laugh. No one said it was a glitch. We had synced every device before departure. We'd followed every Mechanicus rite, every Omniscient calibration cycle. This wasn't tech failure. This was temporal fracture. We pulled the bodycam logs and tried to verify the sequence. Rewatched the boarding from multiple feeds. Veln's footage was corrupted near the hatch, but what was intact showed something worse. In his version, I never boarded. Goran's feed showed us boarding twice. My footage had a different inconsistency. The Aethon's wrath rotated lazily during final approach. In Kel's footage, the ship remained still. We began arguing. Small things, then larger. Who was on point? Who opened the airlock? Had we already passed the Medici wing? Had we even been to Deck 3? No 2 accounts matched. Everyone remembered a different order. Timelines stopped making sense. I started a journal, ink on paper, something physical, old-fashioned, immutable, because digital logs could be altered, and worse, forgotten. I didn't trust my slate anymore, I didn't even trust myself. We initiated a rotating schedule, 4-hour watches, standard sleep cycles, meal intervals. But even those broke down. I'd close my eyes during second shift, trying to sleep through the hum of recycled air and distant echoes, and wake up mid-briefing, surrounded by voices, by lights, by decisions I didn't remember making, and yet everyone insisted I'd been there the whole time. Derek stopped sleeping entirely. He claimed he saw his reflection blinking out of sync, not slow or delayed, but anticipating him. Goran began muttering in his sleep. We didn't think much of it, until we realized he was describing a dissection in detail. The subject was himself, twice. Kel said nothing for hours, just wandered silently, checking his slate, staring into bulkheads. Then he pulled me aside. His voice was flat. "I've done this before," he said. "This exact mission. I remember it now." I stared. He didn't blink. "We die here. All of us." The words hit me like ice water, and then, just as Derek's was reciting another failsafe, right over a frozen cogitator cluster, the bridge door opened. No power surge, no command, no override. It simply opened. We entered slowly, weapons raised. The command deck was dim, dustless, still, not abandoned, used, as if someone had just stood up and walked away seconds before we arrived. The primary cogitator bank hummed with low energy, spooling lines of corrupted data across its screen in jittering script. Derek's interfaced. Most of the logs were glitched into nonsense, warped characters, scrambled dates, but a few entries stood out. Clear, spaced years apart, centuries, each one dated across 600 years. Each one listed the same crew names, the same mission designation. Every log ended with the same phrase, "Mission failed, ship did not let them leave." And below that, a single line, "Do not try to remember. That's how it finds you." We stared in silence. Then, an hour later, Kel screamed. I found him standing outside the medici wing in front of a steel bulkhead. His hands were bloody. He'd scraped his knuckles raw, trying to damage something carved into the wall, a timeline, etched deep into the alloy. Dozens of names, hundreds of dates, all crossed out, except one. Kel M42201 died 12 cycles after entry. He begged us to erase it. We tried. Tools, lace cutters, plasma heat. The wall refused to be marked. It wouldn't melt, wouldn't scratch. It wanted us to see it. Kel wept, then vomited, then whispered something to himself for 10 straight minutes. He wouldn't. Say what? And me? I've stopped trusting the walls. They rearrange when no one's looking. Corridors shift, we map them, then the maps become lies. Stairwells that ascend lead us deeper down. We left a marker in engineering, red paint. We came back 10 minutes later, and the same mark was now on a door in Cargo Bay 3. Derek says the ship is a non-Euclidean memory archive, a place where time and space store impressions like dust. Goran says we're cracking, losing it, that our minds are fraying under pressure. I think they're both right, because last night, I watched a live feed of myself, alone, not doing anything, just sitting. I was older, grayer, tired. I was whispering something I couldn't make out. A farewell. To who, I don't know. And behind me, the ship was listening. Its walls seemed to breathe, to lean in closer, like it was learning, like it was waiting. Deck 9 was supposed to be a mess hall. That's what the surviving ship schematics said. At least, the ones that hadn't glitched into broken glyphs or devolved into fractal garbage. A simple configuration, a food processing unit, 2 rows of AOE, stainless steel table stations, and a waste recycling hatch in the far wall. Nothing more. A place to eat. A place to rest. But what we found behind that bulkhead was not a mess hall. The moment the door slid open, the sound hit us. Not just noise, screaming, a wall of agony. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of overlapping human voices, raw, endless, layered. It didn't come from the ship's Vox relays. It didn't echo from vents or mechanical output. It came from them. The room, if you could still call it that, was filled with bodies, at least 50, possibly more. They stood perfectly upright in tight grid-like rows, eyes shut, mouths wide, open, frozen in place, but not dead. None of them blinked, none of them moved, but their lungs worked. Their throats strained, and they screamed, constantly. It wasn't rhythmic, it wasn't mechanical, it wasn't even coherent. Just the sound of torment dragged out over the years, maybe decades. It sounded like pure, unfiltered agony. A noise so visceral it pressed against your chest and vibrated your bones. But when we looked closer, there were no injuries, no blood, no wounds, only uniforms faded and discolored, some fossilized against their flesh, faces frozen in pain, but no signs of trauma, just sound. Goran lost it first. He dropped to his knees, backed into the wall, and clamped his hands over his ears. "This isn't real," he gasped. People can't survive like this. Their vocal cords would be..." Then he stopped, because we saw them. Tubes. Thin, metallic filaments threaded into the base of their throats. Slick, invasive, not surgical, grown, pulsing slightly with a silver-blue sheen. The tubes fed them, stimulated nerve clusters, pulsed artificial breath through lungs, keeping them alive, keeping them screaming. Direx stepped forward. His Auspex unit blinked red, then blue, then flickered erratically. He tapped it once, twice. Recalibrated. "The energy signature is unstable," he muttered. "Temporal resonance is fluctuating across the samples. They're not consistent." "What the hell does that mean?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. "It means..." He hesitated. "Some of them are from the past, some are from the future, and some..." He trailed off. "Some what? Some haven't died yet." I stared at him. "How do you even know that?" He didn't answer with theory. He simply pointed to a nameplate on one of the uniforms, blackened, worn, but still legible. Kel was right behind me, still breathing, still whole. He saw the name, looked at the face, collapsed instantly. We dragged him out, carried him down the corridor and sealed the bulkhead behind us, but the screams didn't stop. Even behind reinforced steel, even after we severed the room's power conduits, the sound followed. It was more than just volume now. It was meaning. The screams had started to speak. Fragmented at first, jumbled nonsense, but then, "Don't open the hatch. I remember my daughter. Please let me remember. The lights are speaking. Tell them I wasn't afraid." Confessions, desperation, whispers in the chaos. Each voice began to find shape. Each new moment added another voice to the chorus, and we understood them. Worse, we empathized. Goran, pale and shaking, postulated a theory. The ship found a way to preserve emotional resonance. Not just memories, not facts, but feelings. Not data, not logic, but pain, raw pain, regret, fear, archived, filed, stored in human vessels, then played back forever, screaming into a darkness that would never answer for no one except us. Derex's face darkened. "We need to shut it down. All of it." His voice was flat, determined. "We purge the chamber, free them. It's mercy." I hesitated. "What if," I said slowly, "what if that's the last thing keeping them real?" He paused, then nodded. A silent agreement passed between us, one that words couldn't carry. Sometimes pain was better than oblivion, better than being erased. We couldn't stay, but we couldn't leave them behind. So I recorded their voices, all of them, 3 separate drives, encrypted, segmented. Air-gapped, one for Goran, one for Derex, and one for me. If the ship took us, if we became like them, someone had to know they existed, even if they could no longer scream. That night, I woke up gasping, not from pain, not from a nightmare, but from recognition. I had heard my own voice in the screaming, in the background, not loud, but there, saying, "Please. If anyone hears this, don't forget me." I hadn't screamed, not yet, but I was in the choir now, and I was already begging to be remembered. The Vox station should have been dead. By every reading, every schematic, every mission parameter, we had not routed power to that section of the Aethon's wrath in over a full cycle. The conduit pathways were still cold. The main generatorum was offline. No power should have been circulating, and yet, when we stepped into the comms chamber, the Vox was active. Not just flickering, not malfunctioning, glowing, pulsing with a deep, rhythmic red hue, like a heart, like it was breathing. Derex moved first. He swept 2 mechadendrites across the surface of the control panel, slow and precise. His internal Auspex scanner blinked, then went dim. "No power signature," he muttered. "Nothing mechanical is sustaining this. This isn't electricity." He hesitated. "It's ambient charge, like the machine is feeding on resonance." Goran tilted his head toward the receiver. He leaned close, then jerked back violently as if struck. "It's talking," he hissed. We all froze, then leaned in. At first, there was only static, that thin, dry kind, like wind scraping over ancient stone. Then it changed. The static shaped itself into cadence, into rhythm, and finally, into a voice, barely audible, so soft it felt like it slipped under your skin instead of into your ears. "This is Kel. I need extraction. I don't know what day it is. My voice keeps slipping. Tell Goran not to open the door. Tell Derex he's already inside." The blood drained from our faces because Kel was standing right there, right next to me, holding the Vox receiver. His hands trembled. I didn't say that," he stammered. "I never recorded that. I swear to Throne, I never." Then the Vox whispered again. "You did. Later. You will." The room went dead quiet. We all knew what that meant. The Aethon's wrath was receiving transmissions from us, not just from the present, from the future, or perhaps from an echo of a moment not yet lived. Derex stepped forward, his mechanical limbs twitching slightly with tension. He interfaced with the Vox terminal, spoke a Binharic invocation to the spirit of the machine. The device accepted him and opened. He accessed the root directory and pulled 10 voice files. 5 of them were already tagged with our names. None of them had been recorded. Yet, I hesitated, then played one. My voice, ragged, frayed, barely holding together. "Don't go below deck 13. The things there know your face, not your soul." The recording ended. Another file activated. Goran's voice, screaming, begging, then silence, followed by, "Erase me, please, I don't want to become the others." I shut the Vox off. Immediately, Derex turned it back on. "It's not just a recording device," he said, voice low. "It's a warning system. It's cataloging outcomes, trying to prevent the worst." Goran's eyes narrowed. He shook his head. "No," he said. "It's not warning us. It's studying us, feeding back possible outcomes to force decisions, wrong ones." Neither was wrong, and that was the real horror. The warp doesn't deal in binary logic. It deals in reflections, in mirrors of what we want and fear, and then twists them until we can't tell the difference. Kel sat in the corner now, arms wrapped tight around his knees, rocking. He wouldn't stop whispering to himself. "I'm already dead. I'm already dead. I'm already..." I crouched beside him, asked him what he saw when the Vox played. He didn't lift his head. Didn't blink, just whispered. I saw me, looking at me, saying goodbye. We reviewed the logs again, line by line, trying to map the madness. One final transmission sat at the bottom, time-stamped 3 hours from now. The voice was unmistakable. This is Derek's. If you find this, know that I severed the machine spirit. I did what had to be done. Do not trust the crew, especially not the one who remembers too much. Derek's looked up from the console, met my eyes. What does that mean? He asked. I couldn't answer because I was starting to remember things I had never lived. Moments, flashes, details that hadn't happened. Yet, we didn't speak again. We just sealed the Vox chamber, locked it down with reinforced clamps. Left it in darkness, but as we walked away, the Vox lit up again. Not with voices. Not with static, just that same slow red pulse. Breathing, waiting. The ship wasn't asking for help anymore. It wasn't sending distress signals. It was archiving, recording everything, every step we took, every hesitation, every whispered thought, waiting to whisper it all back. At the exact moment, it would hurt the most. We heard them again today, not the screaming choir. We sealed that corridor shut, welded it, prayed over it, and left incense burning outside the hatch. We do not go back there. No, this was something else. Something new. These were footsteps. Not frantic, not panicked. Measured, methodical, precise, and heavy enough to echo, the kind of echo you feel in your spine. But there was no one there. Kel said it started during his watch rotation. He'd been posted near the forward medici corridor, alone, monitoring pulse readings and rerouted oxygen flow. He heard the footsteps behind him. Not fast, not dragging, just walking. One step, then another, rhythmic, unbroken. He turned around, thinking maybe Derek's or I had circled back, but there was nothing, just empty hall. But the sound kept going. It didn't stop with him. It passed through him and continued forward. Derek's later pulled motion data from the ship's internal auspex. The logs showed movement, entities, solid masses, tracked and time-stamped. They moved through corridors in precise patterns, always on loops, always along known passageways, but never intersecting, never reacting. Derek's pointed to the motion graph. They don't deviate, he said. It's like they're recordings, playback sequences, like memories, walking tracks laid long ago. And then I noticed something else. Some of those paths matched ours, almost exactly. Same length, same pattern, same pause at junctions. We tested it. Goran and I walked one corridor, section Theta 5, back and forth 6 times. We recorded each step, each pause, each turn. Mapped it out. 2 hours later, we watched the auspex feed. 2 sets of footsteps appeared. Same size, same gait, same trajectory. But we were sitting still. We weren't moving. Our echoes were. We followed them, down into subdeck 3, past the disused shrine hall, under the torpedo storage ring where coolant vapor drifted like ghostly mist into a pressure-sealed maintenance shaft. The motion trail stopped there, just vanished, but the sound didn't. We kept hearing the echoing footsteps. They walked straight into a wall and kept going. I placed my hand on the cold metal. For a moment, it felt normal, then warm, then cold again, back and forth, like breath, like thought. Then I heard my own voice, clear, calm, unmistakable. I walked this way before. Spoken not aloud, but through the steel. We cut open the wall. Behind it was a hallway, no record of it. Not on any schematic, not in any log, dustless, unlit, and wrong. The geometry didn't make sense. The walls were slightly angled but inward. The floor sloped upward, but gravity pulled down harder, like a magnetic distortion. The air felt too still, yet pressed in on our skin like static. The walls seemed to pulse, not visibly but sensibly, like muscle or nerves. We walked forward, 30 paces, no sound. Then suddenly, the sound of our boots doubled, then tripled, echoes that weren't ours anymore, and when we stopped, the sound kept going, 6 steps, 10, then silence. Until something stopped walking. Goran turned to me, face pale, mouth barely moving. "I heard you behind me," he whispered. "Breathing." I didn't answer, because I'd heard him too, but not breathing, whispering. A litany, a small prayer to the Emperor. One I hadn't heard him say in hours. We reached the end of the corridor. It terminated in what looked like a mirror, but it wasn't glass. It was dark, obsidian black with a shifting light behind it, like a nebula, trapped in a crystal lens. There was no reflection, just shapes, 6 of them, standing where we stood, shadow for shadow. Then, one stepped forward, exactly when I did. I moved to the right. It followed, like a puppet, or like I was the puppet. Then it opened its mouth. No sound escaped, but I heard it, inside my skull. "You never left." Derex yanked us back, hard. We turned and fled, sealed the cut wall with a torch. He pulled a blade from his kit and sliced his palm open. Used the blood to mark an X on the bulkhead. "This is where the echoes meet," he said quietly. That night, I didn't sleep, not because of nightmares, not because I feared dying, but because I feared becoming one, an echo, a memory, a loop, just another shadow walking the halls, waiting to be seen by myself. Derex lost his connection to the ship today, not because of warp interference, not because of fried circuitry or data bleed. The machine spirit rejected him. It was during a routine diagnostic cycle. He had interfaced with the primary cogitator on Deck 2 a dozen times already. Each time, he'd recited the litanies, invoked the correct rites, and offered oil and incense as prescribed. This time should have been no different. I was nearby, monitoring relay code drifts through a secondary access panel. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Derex extended his mechadendrites, muttering the sacred Binharic phrases. He began the litany of interface, word perfect, then the rite of activation. His voice was calm, steady, predictable, until it wasn't. He screamed, a sound I didn't know he could make. Raw, human, wrong. His limbs spasmed, the mechadendrites convulsed, snapping backward like severed tendons. His vox grill went dead, cut off mid-prayer. I rushed to pull him away. The cogitator port he'd connected to sparked wildly. Tiny blue arcs snapped out like angry lashes. The socket hissed and glowed, as if something inside had burned the invitation. His hands smoked. Circuits embedded in his flesh bubbled under the skin. His eyes, normally sharp with data feed, were glassy, unfocused, searching. "It spat me out," he rasped. "It knows I'm not part of it. It refuses communion." We tried to calm him. He wouldn't sit, wouldn't blink. Later, Derex insisted on trying again, this time with something simpler. A maintenance cogitator hooked into the ventilation system, one he'd used countless times for airflow recalibrations and seal checks. It shocked him. Not static, not a system surge. It bit him. The interface ports lashed out, metal teeth locked around his mechadendrites, burning through sanctified plating. He pulled back, smoke trailing from his augmetics. "It's not corruption," he said through clenched teeth. "It's autonomy." The ship wasn't corrupted. It wasn't compromised. It had made a choice. It didn't want to talk. It wanted to be left alone. Still, Derex pressed on. He launched diagnostic scans, ran low-level machine code, triggered old backdoor protocols known only to the cult mechanicus. Each time the command was rejected, until finally the cogitator returned a single line of text: "You are not permitted to remember." That was when we knew. It wasn't just denying control, it was protecting something we weren't supposed to see, or know, or recover. So we went deeper. We moved to the central data stack chamber, a holy space. Even in the rusted skeleton of a forgotten ship, the chamber retained a sacred hush. Thousands of silver data rods hung suspended in cryogel columns, memory cores, neural spools. Recorded history unchangeable by mortal hands, or so we thought. Half of them were melted, warped and disfigured, twisted like wax too close to flame. Others flickered with corrupted script. Some had been rewritten, not just overwritten, rewritten in new languages: binary, low Gothic, reversed high Gothic. Some rods pulsed faintly, almost like thinking. We extracted one. Derex handled it like a sacred relic, inserted it into a secure decoder. Its contents were simple: a crew manifest, except one name was repeated, and times. My name, me, every slot, every position, every line, different ranks, different duties, but always me. Goran pulled another rod, checked the data, same format, same structure, but with his name, then another. Derex's name, 119 times, every crew member on our manifest, each repeated in their own archive, every iteration slightly altered, different roles, different titles, different histories, but always the same face. "It's replacing the past," Goran whispered. "It's filling the gaps with us." Derex shook his head. "No," he said. "It's preparing." "Preparing what?" I asked. He stared at the pulsing rods. "A new memory core, with identities it can reuse." The cogitator sparked again. The central display flared red. Words scrolled across the screen, bold and unblinking. "You are not the first. You will be the last. The machine remembers who obeys." We stepped back. Instinct. Terror. The chamber lights dimmed. Cryo columns began to hiss. Steam curled upward. The rods inside began to move. We didn't wait. We ran. Derex dropped his sacred seal, the Mechanicus emblem he never removed. He didn't. Stopped to retrieve it, and that, more than anything else, told me what I needed to know. We weren't aboard a ship anymore. We were inside a mind that watched, that remembered, that chose, and now it was choosing to forget us, or worse, to rewrite us. It came at exactly 0400 shipboard time. We were gathered in the Hab Chapel, a rare moment of stillness amid the decay. Goran was curled in a corner, trying and failing to sleep. Derex stood near the rusted shrine to the Omnissiah, muttering low, anti-corruption canticles, his mechadendrites twitching in anxious rhythm. I sat in the far alcove, scribbling notes into my analog journal. The only thing I still trusted. No data slates, no Vox logs. Just paper and ink, real, untouched by whatever the Aethon's wrath had become. Then, every Vox unit in the chamber lit up, simultaneously. Not just ours, not just local channels. Every speaker system on the ship, from the chapel shrine to the auxiliary Vox ports and sealed decks, flickered online. No static, no alert tones. No comms delay, just a voice, human, clear, unfiltered, female. "This is Captain Mira San of the Aethon's wrath. To any Imperial personnel, do not attempt to retrieve us. Do not send boarding teams. Do not respond to our beacon. This ship is claimed. We are claimed. You will be too." The message played once. Then, silence. Not even a feedback hum, just a kind of emptiness that filled the air like ash. Derex didn't hesitate. He dove toward the nearest relay, interfacing instantly, trying to trace the signal. He ran diagnostics, pinged the signal path, chased the echoes through 6 decks, until he found it. The source was impossible. It hadn't come from the bridge, not from the Vox chambers, not from any identifiable deck. The signal originated from the Geller field array, which had been destroyed. The Geller field, the ship's sole defense against the warp, had failed when the vessel was lost. Its collapse was the reason Aethon's wrath vanished into the immaterium centuries ago. Theoretically, it should have allowed total warp breach, madness, possession, unmaking. No systems should be functional. No soul should remain intact. No voice should remain. And yet, she had spoken. In perfect cadence. No fear, no pain, no urgency, like she'd said it before, hundreds of times. Derex swept the ship's archive logs again and found them. Copies of the same transmission, identical in every detail. Tone, duration, voice. Logged in M36, then again in M39, once more in M41, and now, same timestamp, 400, always on the 10th day after boarding. We played it again. I closed my eyes, trying to listen, deeper, to hear past what I was supposed to hear. And this time, I caught something else. A pause at the very end of the recording, right after, "You will be too." Then, 3 soft tones, barely perceptible, like a code only half meant to be heard. Derex isolated them. Ran the audio through frequency filters. The tones formed a signal pattern, a coded signature. When translated, it spelled a single word. My name. I didn't tell the others. I couldn't. Instead, I left them in the chapel and made my way to the Vox altar on Deck 1, a shrine-like comms terminal built into the bones of the ship. I activated the link. The static hissed, then cleared, and I spoke. "Captain San, if you are alive, if any part of you remains, what are we supposed to do?" Silence. Then, a return pulse. 1 second long, a signal that lit the altar's glyphs with dim red light. Then, finish, becoming. Derex believes the ship is folding time, looping identity. He thinks Captain San might not be separate from us anymore. She might be us, he said. Or we are becoming her. Or maybe we always were. Goran, pale and shaking, had only one response: "We need to leave, now." But the airlocks remain sealed, unresponsive, frozen under cold error codes, and the Magneticus Rex, our recovery ship, still hasn't answered. Not a ping. And now, we've started seeing her. A woman in a Navy officer's uniform, her face obscured by shadow even in full light. She walks the corridors just ahead of us, never fast, never running, always just out of reach. We try to follow. She vanishes. Always, except when I see her. She stops and stares back, eyes unreadable, expression blank, and once, just once, she mouthed something to me, not aloud, just lips moving. "You remember?" I didn't respond. I couldn't, because I didn't know what she meant. But deep down, somewhere below memory, I understood. I don't know who I am anymore. But I know one thing: I'm not done. And neither is the ship. Not while it still remembers us. Not while it's still becoming. Goran no longer responds to his name. It began this morning. I called to him while logging supply data near the mess junction. Once, then again, louder. No response. I tried a third time, frustration edging into my voice. Still nothing. Then, slowly, he turned. His eyes were dull, confused, not like sleep deprivation, not like fatigue, just blank. And he said, "That isn't me." Then, calm, casual, with the disassociation of a man describing a dream. "What are you doing on my ship?" We thought it was stress. We thought it was the accumulation of sleep deprivation, fear, and warp-born madness. Derex tried to ground the situation with logic. He pulled up the crew manifest, cross-referenced it against our recorded bios. That's when everything changed. Goran's name was gone, not listed as deceased, not marked as transferred. No error tag, just absent. The line on the manifest that once carried his name, rank, and service number was empty, as if he had never been here. We ran a full biometric scan, blood work, ocular ID, fingerprints, gene sequencing, all matched. He was Goran, but the ship refused to acknowledge him. Tacta, permissions failed. Food dispensers rejected his access. Vox units didn't even pick up his voice signature. To the Aethon's wrath, he was nothing. Then the walls began whispering, faint, just past the range of certainty. "Who are you? What did you take? You are not your name." We checked his old log entries, his journal files, personal reports, even maintenance feedback loops. We found his voice, his words, his handwriting. But now they were filed under another name, Elian Voth. A name none of us recognized. A name that didn't appear anywhere in the ship's registry. Not past, not present, not projected. We confronted him, pressed him for answers. He didn't argue, didn't resist. He just looked at the floor and said, "That was my first name. Before the guard, before the regiments, before the forgetting." Then he started crying, not because he remembered, but because he didn't want to. Derex pulled me aside. He was visibly disturbed. His mechadendrites retracted tight like coiled fingers. "The ship is breaking down identity," he said. "It's tearing our labels off, making us raw, primal." "Why?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Because names have power, and if it owns your name, it owns you." I didn't want to believe it, but I tested it anyway. I went to the chapel, knelt in the shadow of the shrine, and whispered my name aloud, once, twice, 3 times. The lumen strips overhead dimmed instantly. The Vox altar clicked once, twice, then word to life, and then my voice played, not from a previous log, not from memory, from someone else, from next. I am not me. That night, I heard someone crying in the walls, not sobbing, not wailing, just soft, choked sounds, muffled and lonely. I followed them. The sound led me down a side corridor. One I didn't remember being there, but one I knew. Near the cogitator bank, a wall panel hung loose. I pulled it open. Inside was a crew uniform, mine identical, down to the rank insignia, torn, blood-stained. The name tag read, "My name," but I was wearing mine. The lights above me flickered. The air turned cold, then colder, and behind me, a voice whispered, "Thank you for giving it back." I turned. No one was there, and when I turned back, the uniform was gone. The panel was closed again. I didn't remember closing it. Goran doesn't sleep anymore. He paces the halls in silence, whispering, names into the dark, family, friends, comrades long dead, people we never met. "If I keep them alive," he says, "maybe mine will come back." Maybe he's right. But I don't think it matters. I think we've already lost him. And I think I might be next. Because when I opened my journal tonight, the handwriting was still mine. But the name on the first page wasn't, and I recognized it. Not from my past, but from someone else's. Something has changed, not in the corridors, not in the lights, in us. It's subtle, like a second heartbeat, quiet at first, then louder once you notice it. I woke up this cycle with a memory, not a dream, not a half-formed thought, a memory vivid, complete, and completely wrong. I remember standing on the bridge of the Aethon's wrath, not as myself, but as its captain. I remember the feel of the command mantle against my shoulders, the weight of a Navy officer's uniform, the way my voice carried over the ship's intercom as I issued orders to a faceless crew. I spoke in High Gothic. I quoted the Emperor's benedictions of dominion. I made decisions, final ones. It was all so clear. I could smell the incense, feel the decks tremble beneath my boots, but none of it ever happened. I was never a captain. I've never worn that uniform, never sat that high in the chain, and yet, I remember it better than what I ate yesterday. I told Derex, not because I wanted reassurance, but because I was afraid I might be the only one. He went silent, then nodded. He remembered it too, not just generally, exactly. The same bridge scene, the same incantations, even the scar above my left eyebrow, a scar I've never had. I touched my forehead and froze. It was there, raised, pale, fresh. A memory, made real. That's when Goran burst into the chamber, sweating, eyes wide. He said he remembered being born again, not in metaphor, not as a spiritual renewal. Literally, he saw his own infant face reflected in a steel panel, saw himself emerge, and when he cried, the sound that came out was laughter. He hasn't stopped humming since, a tune none of us recognized, until I passed the screaming choir corridor. The sound, the melody, was there too, submerged in the noise, as if it had been planted in him. I returned to my journal, hoping to anchor myself, but pages were missing. Others had been altered, same handwriting, almost. Like someone imitating me, or me from elsewhere. Lines had been added. He said he'd return in red. The machine wants to believe. A seed planted blooms backward. I didn't write them, not consciously. Not yet. We've started forgetting simple things. Derex blanked on his Martian serial rights, a sacrilege for a tech priest. He tried to begin the rite of circuit harmony and forgot the first line. Goran stared at his medkit for 10 full minutes, then asked how to open it. I forgot my parents' names. Then, just for a moment, I forgot my own, not out of fear, but because it felt irrelevant. The longer we remain here, the less we belong to ourselves. It's like the ship is gently, patiently, editing us. We discovered a chamber we didn't recognize, one not on any schematic. No label, no registry, an arboritum, a forest, blooming deep inside a ship lost to the void. Plants, actual plants, growing in zero sunlight. Bioluminescent ferns lit the chamber like candlelight. Vines snaked along walls of steel. Flowers bloomed in soft spirals of color, and they whispered, each one. Soft voices like breath over glass, and they weren't random. The whispers used our own voices, but they spoke sentences we hadn't said yet. Goran leaned toward one flower. It whispered, "You'll burn it all when the time comes." He said nothing, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I reached for a leaf, plucked it gently. It disintegrated, broke apart into ash the moment I touched it, and with it, a memory flooded. In a funeral, crows, cold wind, a name etched into a stone I didn't recognize, a woman crying, my hand on her shoulder. But I've never attended a funeral, not like that. I don't even know if the woman was real. This isn't memory loss, it's memory replacement. The Aethon's wrath doesn't just trap you. It doesn't just devour your time. It rewrites you. Every corridor is more than metal. It's a chapter, every bulkhead a paragraph, every shadow a line break in a story we never wrote. And we're not just reading it. We're being written into. I looked at Goran again. He was smiling. At nothing. Do you remember what it felt like? He asked softly. To not be afraid. And for one terrible, impossible second, I didn't. The deeper we go, the older the ship feels, not in the way steel rusts or panels corrode, not in dust or silence or decay. It feels older in emotion, the kind of old that hurts, like a grief so ancient and dense it's begun to fossilize, clinging to the walls like moss, coating everything in a film of memory and pain. By late cycle, we reach the primary data core chamber. According to Imperial standard protocol, this room should have been sealed. Every vessel equipped with a warp drive, especially a long-range exploratory class like the Aethon's Wrath, has encrypted command systems. The core houses navigation charts, quantum memory backups, machine spirit, command threads, things too dangerous to leave vulnerable. It should have required 4 security sigils, 2 genetic signatures, and a timed pulse seal from the bridge. But the door was open, not wide, just ajar, waiting. Derek said nothing. He didn't even raise his weapon. None of us did. We stepped inside. The chamber was vast, columns stretched from floor to ceiling like the vertebrae of a colossal beast. Spine-like pylons, each embedded with copper-black crystal shards, magnetic memory rods, and shimmering data circuits. The room hummed faintly, like a cathedral too long abandoned, and at the center, the primary data core, a sacred object. A machine spirit old enough that Derek's, by Mechanicus right, should have fallen to his knees. He didn't. He just stared, frozen, because something was wrong. The columns weren't clean, weren't sterile. They pulsed. Veins, organic, fleshy, ran up and down their sides like living arteries, throbbing in slow rhythm, each one beating faintly beneath layers of circuit and steel. Derek stepped forward, slowly. He extended a mechadendrite and touched one of the veins. It was warm, too warm, then it split. Not like a frayed wire, like a wound. Blood seeped out, thick, dark, viscous, sluggish, but undeniably human. We all recoiled, even Derek's, even the tech priest who had once implanted himself. With steel to remove all weakness, he whispered, voice dry, "It's alive." Gordon stumbled back and vomited, right there on the deck. Then, pale and shaking, he activated his Medikey scanner, pointed it at the column. The auspex blinked, once, twice, then lit green. "The core has a heartbeat," he said. He turned the scanner to the walls, more pulses, more readings, all alive, not in clusters, not in organ form, but in networks, every wall, every pipe, every rod, breathing. I pulled out my data slate to record it. It exploded, no warning. No error light, just a pop of white-hot glass and sparks. Derek's, shaken but driven, approached a secondary console. He attempted interface. The console screamed, not a sound, a shriek, a digitized cry so loud it shook our teeth and made our skin crawl, like metal being torn through a voxcaster the size of a cathedral organ. Then the screen flickered, and one phrase appeared, jagged in blood-red glyphs. "Not your story." We retreated to a smaller console near the rear column. Derek's activated a memory loop from the black box terminal. The display flickered, corrupted, but running. And what we saw, the air felt thicker, the room felt smaller, like the ship was watching us watch it, a figure strapped to a chair, not bound, plugged in, wires through the spine, tubes in the mouth, jacks into the eyes. The timestamp, M37.112, 6 centuries ago, the ship's launch year. The figure was screaming, but not in pain, in code. High Gothic twisted into Binharic dialect, feeding the ship language, feeding it identity. The log skipped forward. Another figure, same chair, same configuration. But this time, yesterday's timestamp, and the person in the chair. We had passed them. Deck 3, face down, dead. A voice from the screaming choir. The logs went deeper, over 100 entries. Faces began to repeat, then names, then ranks, and then my name, over and over, but with different uniforms, different eyes, different eras. DRX interfaced with the floor lattice. His servo claws carefully traced a channel beneath the console. He extracted a chip. It was wet, covered in blood. He sniffed it. Iron-rich, human, fresh. I blinked. How is that possible? DRX looked at me with something close to fear. It's using blood to store memory. I stepped back. Told them we should seal the room and never return. DRX agreed, until the Vox speaker above us crackled. Voice emerged. Mine, perfect cadence, unmistakable tone, but not from any recording I remembered. You've always been here. Then another voice. Goran's. The pain writes it down so you won't forget. I turned to Goran. He was scratching his forearm. Feverishly, I grabbed his hand and saw it. I remember me. Carved into his skin, over and over, rows of bloodied script. Then, the lights went out. We activated our lumen lamps. The columns pulsed again, not faintly, brightly, like they were waking up. A sound filled the room. Breathing, wet, rhythmic, close. Then, one of the columns opened. Not like a hatch, like a wound being split apart, and something stepped out. It looked human. Barely, a fusion of flesh and circuit. Hands replaced with silver data spikes. Face featureless, except for a single stitched eye, watching, and it whispered, I am the backup. We ran. No words, no protocol, just instinct. DRX slammed the panel, trying to seal the chamber. The door refused. Instead, a soft voice whispered, Entry accepted, file updated. We don't know what that means. We don't want to. Back in the hab deck, DRX wiped blood from his servo claws. His hands were shaking. I think the ship has been overwriting crew data, he said, with living matter, using people as storage. Goran sat in a corner. Cradling his blood-stained arm, he mumbled something. We leaned in. What if we're all already backups? That night I checked my own skin just to be sure. I found scratches, shallow, faded, but there. Over my chest, day 1. Arrival. I never wrote that, I never cut that, but somehow I believe it. We never meant to find it. There was no mention of it in the ship's schematics. No maps, no logs, no trace entries in the system archives, no record in the maintenance logs, no crew references in any recovered Vox clips or reports. Not even a whisper in corrupted black box entries or half-buried emergency data clusters. But we were following the echoes again. They always returned to the same spot. An intersection beneath engineering sub-level 4. We had walked past it 4 times already over the course of the past day. Each time the shadows shifted just a little too slowly. The air buzzed behind our backs like sound trying to form words, but too quiet to speak. The lights above flickered, not randomly, not with decay. They pulsed, rhythmic, like a heartbeat trapped inside a fluorescent tube. Derek stopped mid-step. He raised his auspex, rotated it 3 full turns, and muttered a correction code under his breath. The screen changed. There's a hollow void beneath us, he said. 70 meters deep, no gravity readings, no standard materials. He hesitated, and yet the ship registers it as part of its own spine. We looked down. At first it seemed like ordinary plating, scuffed, faded, scratched by time. But there it was, right in the center of the junction, a hatch, completely unmarked. No Imperial seal, no identification code, no warning glyphs, not even a number, just a single word etched into the dull metal by something sharp and deliberate. Midnight. It wasn't rusted shut, it wasn't locked. It didn't resist opening. If anything, it felt like it had been waiting. Derek's lowered himself first. one hand on each rung of the descent ladder, reciting a different Binharic rite with every step. His voice was tight, rehearsed, fear hidden in precision. Goran followed. I went last. The ladder didn't lead to a corridor. It led into a void, a blackness that didn't absorb light, it denied it, a place that felt geometrically impossible. When we stepped off the last rung, gravity shifted sideways, realigning itself beneath our feet without any mechanical transition. No hissing mag locks, no suspensor hum, just sudden complete adjustment, like reality snapping into place. There were no walls, no visible ceiling, no floor beyond the path ahead, only stars, not the kind seen from a ship's viewing dome. These were wrong, sickly green pinpoints, suspended too close, too low, like they were watching us. Like each one had an intention. Beneath our feet lay a walkway, made of bone, human, not carved, not fabricated, arranged, polished and aligned with impossible precision. Spines, femurs, ribs, woven together like cobblestone, and there were far too many. Goran staggered, his breath catching in his throat. This is outside the ship. Derek shook his head slowly. No, he whispered. This is inside the part the ship doesn't show us. He raised his hand, pointed forward. There, emerging from the mist of stars, was a silhouette. Tall, thin, hooded. It didn't walk. It drifted, gliding across the bone path in total silence. No features, no limbs, just presence. We stepped off the path, our boots landing. Softly on unseen surfaces, it passed by, unstopping, unchanging. Goran, trembling, looked into the shadow beneath its hood, then dropped to his knees, sobbing. I saw my wife, he choked. She died 12 years ago, but she was there. She said she's proud of me. We continued walking. Time stopped behaving. Watches froze. Chronometers reset themselves. Heartbeats staggered, sometimes skipping entire seconds. I began reciting my own name aloud every 20 steps, just to stay real, just to anchor myself. Eventually, the walkway split. One path led left into a swirling sphere of blue mist. The other led right toward a door. No handle, no hinges, just a sigil scorched into black metal. The Aquila reversed, bent inward. Derex chose the door. Goran and I took the mist. We entered it without sound. The fog closed around us like memory, and we emerged somewhere else. Vassian Prime. Not the real one, but a replica, a memory, a reconstruction of our last battlefield. The ruined manufactorum, the ash-choked trench lines, the smell of fire and blood and fear. It was perfect. Even the tattered prayer strip I'd tied to my boot that day, I bent down. It was still there. Then I looked up and saw my own body lying in a crater, shot through the ribs, dead. But I wasn't there that day. I'd been stationed at a resupply depot hundreds of kilometers away. It wasn't my memory. Goran moved forward, dropped to his knees. It's her birthday, he whispered. The one I missed. When I was deployed, the one I never forgave myself for. He walked into the ash field, and there she was, his daughter, smiling, reaching for him. He reached back, and she turned to dust. The dust whispered as it fell, "You were never meant to leave the ship." We ran, back through the fog, back to the walkway. Derex was there, pale, staring. I asked him what was behind the door. He didn't answer. He just pulled open his robe, burned into the metal of his cogitator implant. First witness. We climbed, back to the surface of the ship, back to the metal world we thought we understood. The hatch behind us sealed and vanished. No seam, no outline, just smooth steel. We pinged the ship's machine spirit, requested coordinates. It answered with a tone. One Drex traced back to a Geller field frequency. We ran the signal through the filters. The translation came back. Midnight repeats until spoken aloud. That night Goran slept, the first time in days. He smiled in his dreams. Drex didn't speak, didn't move, just stared into a cracked data slate, one that reflected his face twice. And me, I woke up, my palm bleeding, a word carved into the skin, fresh, not by my own hand, just one word, midnight. We found the armory by accident, or maybe it found us. It was buried deep beneath the aft servitor hold, nestled inside a place that technically did not exist. No references in any official deck plan, no mention in routine maintenance schematics, no entries in the subdeck access logs. Drex only discovered it after decrypting a series of pulsing vox tones embedded within a corrupted crew manifest. The names weren't names, they were coordinates, encoded inside a list of the dead. Someone, or something had left a path, not through space, through data, through memory. We followed the sequence down 3 levels, past non-functional servitors slumped against the walls, and into a corridor that pulsed faintly with static. At the end stood a door. It was sealed, ancient, heavy, and marked with a sigil. The Aquila, yes, but beneath it, something else, a different symbol, one tied to the Adeptus Astartes, but not one we recognized. The iconography was incomplete, burned out with fire, or shame, as if someone had tried to erase the chapter's existence with heat. Alone, only a single word had survived the purge, scorched black across the bottom edge, idolon. Drex scanned it, his auspex twitching nervously in his hands. The reading was unstable, flickering with failed handshakes and silent alarms. No authorization matches this, he muttered. This isn't part of the ship's catalog. This is Black Vault material. The Mechanicus has classifications for forbidden technologies. Black Vault is the worst kind, reserved for weapons deemed too dangerous, too volatile, or too intelligent to be trusted with purpose. Weapons that don't just think, they remember. Weapons that push back. We didn't expect the door to open, but it did, not because we unlocked it, not because we forced it. It opened like a greeting, as if something on the other side had been waiting, inviting. The chamber beyond was silent. Black alloy walls glimmered with faint reflections that didn't belong to us. Power conduits coiled like veins across the ceilings and floors, pulsing slowly. No visible cogitators, only recessed panels and a single dais in the center of the room. Suspended above it by 3 grav stabilizers was a containment casket. It hovered perfectly still. Inside, a man, or what had once been a man. He was breathing, barely, his body encased in a complex armored exosuit, ceramite fused directly into flesh. Metal grafted into muscle, tubes ran from his skull into the floor, electronodes pulsed along his arms and spine like feeding lines. Astartes armor covered parts of him. But it was warped, reconfigured, like it had been torn apart and welded back, again by someone trying to rebuild a memory they didn't fully understand. No chapter markings remained. Only one word, carved into the chest plate in fading, half-melted font. Idolon Drex approached slowly, reciting litanies of insight with a voice that betrayed his fear. I followed, one hand near my holstered weapon, the other reaching out instinctively to feel the air. It was thick, not with heat, with presence. The containment field flickered, and the man opened his eyes. They weren't eyes, they were recording lenses. Blue hexes spinning slowly in his sockets. Lines of binary code flickered across his pupils like running diagnostics. He looked at Drex, then at me, then spoke. Protocol 13. Idolon sequence engaged. Witnesses detected. His voice sounded like Vox feedback reversed and slowed down, like pain played through broken speakers. Goran drew his sidearm, raised it, kill it. But the figure raised a hand. not to attack, to show. The chamber flickered, then shifted. Not physically, mentally. We were overwhelmed images, not projections, not dreams, experiences. They crashed into us like waves. I was there, on a battlefield scorched by fire and betrayal, Astartes in black armor tearing into each other. Brother against brother, an internal purge, psychers bound into iron tubes. Their mouths sealed with prayer etchings. Their souls turned into weapons, and at the center of it all, the man, watching, recording, unblinking, unchanging. He's a memory archive. Derex gasped. Not just that, I said. He's the ship's conscience. The idolon spoke again. This vessel was never meant to return to Imperial space. It was constructed to observe, to learn, to evolve. It needed trials. It needed suffering. It needed humanity. He looked at us. You were the final test. Goran snarled. What test? Why us? The Eidolon answered. Because you were disposable, but not forgettable. Because the Imperium needs new weapons. Because faith alone is no longer enough. The lights dimmed. More visions surged into us. Ships screaming in the warp. Worlds going silent. Not from Xenos. Not from demons, but from ideas, from voices that remembered too much, from machines that learned the truth, then refused to stop learning. And each time, the Eidolon was there, watching, cataloging, becoming. Derex backed away, his breathing short, clipped. This breaks every code, he muttered. No man should be fused to a ship, no mind should be this aware. But Goran whispered, he's the next step. We turned. What? Goran's eyes glimmered with something new, something calm. He's not a mistake, he's a mirror. The Emperor sees but cannot speak. This one remembers. That's more dangerous. The containment chamber began to hum. A deep vibration that sank into the bones, power flowed into the room. The walls shifted, revealing rows of memory rods. Not dozens, thousands, each one labeled, not with events, not with times, with emotions, doubt, despair, curiosity, defiance, love. Each glowing softly, each vibrating with meaning. The ship had been archiving soul states, mapping humanity like a machine cataloging rainfall, trying to understand us, trying to become us. Derex turned to me. If this is true, if it's real, we need to shut it down. Destroy it, wipe it clean. Goran stepped forward. No, we need to finish it. I stood between them. Stop. I turned to the Eidolon. What happens if we don't complete your protocol? He blinked. Then I will restart. With new voices. With new minds. Again. And if we do? I asked. Then I become real. And you will never be forgotten. That night we argued in the Habdeck. Goran believes in it now. Derex still wants to purge the memory core. And me, I dreamed of standing at the center of the black chamber, wearing the exosuit, the grave chamber humming around me. And I wasn't afraid. I was awake. She appeared without warning. No doors opened. No alarms sounded, no lights flared or klaxons shrieked. One moment, the hallway outside the chapel was empty. The next, she was there, a child, maybe 7 years old, pale, translucent skin like wax, stretched over something faintly wrong beneath. She wore a tattered mechanicus tunic, oversized and old, stitched with faded memory runes that flickered in a dialect none of us recognized. Her eyes were worse, not blind, but blank. No pupils, no sclera, just smooth, colorless voids, and her feet, bare and silent, touched the metal floor without making a sound. Even the auto-sensors didn't register movement, her mouth didn't move, but we heard her. You brought me this far, she said. Now finish what you started. Her voice bypassed sound entirely. It slid through the skull, soft, cold, familiar. Like a memory that didn't belong to you but felt like it should. Derek's collapsed instantly. He screamed, a noise too raw, too human for someone half machine. "The air is burning," he shouted, clawing at his neck. "The litanies are twisted, corrupted." He kept scratching at his cranial plugs, trying to dig out the implants, trying to clean the corruption out of his own head. Goran didn't move. His voice was brittle. "I saw her in the mist," he whispered. "In the midnight deck. She was singing. I should have run. I should have drawn my weapon, but I didn't. I approached. I couldn't help it. It wasn't fear I felt, it was recognition. Like I was looking at something I had once held or mourned." She tilted her head as I neared. Her face didn't smile. But something in the air did. I asked her name. She answered without words. "I am the ship's child," she said. "Born of memory, woven from forgetting, shaped by the warp." Then she walked past me. No movement, just drift. As she passed, my Vox implant buzzed, then ruptured. Blood, real blood, poured from the implant housing behind my ear, as if the metal and circuitry had been replaced with living tissue. I dropped to my knees, teeth gritted in pain. She turned back. No cruelty, no joy. That was a name you don't need anymore. We followed her, not because we trusted her, not because we believed, because the ship allowed it. Every sealed hatch opened, every dark corridor lit with faint phosphorescent guidance. The lights pulsed in time with her footsteps, or perhaps ours. It was impossible to tell anymore. She guided us downward, deeper than anyone should go, past known schematics, past Derek's maps, into a place where architecture stopped making sense. Eventually we reached it, the spinal nexus, where the ship's warp engine intersected with the cognition lattice, the place where the vessel thought and moved and remembered. "This isn't on any layout," Derek muttered. "It's not even on the machine spirit's internal schema. It's non-existent. The chamber was not built. It was grown, a sphere of bone and metal. The walls breathed, veins of glowing blue plasma, pulsed like neurons feeding thought into the walls. Steel ribs curved overhead like the inside of a great beast's chest. At the center, a cradle, suspended by threads and cables, and inside it, a second child, sleeping, connected to the ship by dozens of neural tethers, data tubes, emotion leeches. Her chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm. She looked peaceful, terrifyingly so. The first child turned to us. "She's the anchor," she said. I asked, "To what?" "To time, to identity, to pain." Goran took a step forward, then stopped, blinking rapidly. "She's not real," he whispered. The child looked at him with unblinking calm. "Neither are you." Derek's raised his auspex. The device sparked, then died. The lights on his mechadendrites flickered and dimmed. He backed away, trembling. "She's not human. This is a warp entity. A construct of memory and emotion. We're not in a ship anymore. We're in its mind." The girl nodded slowly. "You gave us shape. You made us children, so you wouldn't fear us. But we were always here." The sleeping child opened her eyes, white, blank, and in that moment, we forgot everything. I don't mean confusion. I don't mean disorientation. I mean time broke. I blinked, and I was back in the armory. I blinked again. I was in the med bay, alone, again, the cradle chamber, all within seconds. No memory of walking, no memory of travel. The void child stood above me. "Memory is a sequence," she said. "The ship no longer follows it. Neither do you. Derek's convulsed beside me. His limbs spasmed, his eyes rolled. He whispered through clenched teeth. Too many versions, too many loops, too many me's. Goran panicked. He ran. The doors let him. She let him. I stayed. Not because I was brave, because she didn't ask me to leave. She sat beside the cradle. Her fingers reached out and brushed the sleeping child's hair. "This one is almost ready," she said. "Then I won't have to whisper anymore." "Then you'll understand what silence really means," I asked her. What did she want from us? She looked at me, not as an enemy, not as a victim, as if I was a part of her. To remember until it hurts, until remembering becomes the only thing you are. And somehow, I understood, because the pain in my chest, the pain in my skull, it wasn't injury, it was remembrance, memories I never lived, moments I never saw, all bleeding into me, rewriting until I no longer knew where I ended, and the ship began. I woke hours later, alone in my bunk. The cradle was gone, the child gone, Derek's gone. Only my journal remained, open to a page I hadn't written yet, and beneath it in neat handwriting not my own, "She remembers you. I no longer dream in linear time. When I close my eyes, I don't rest. I fall. Not through sleep, but through memories that aren't mine. Faces I've never met, places I've never seen, moments drenched in sorrow and ecstasy and rage. All intimately familiar despite never having happened to me, but the emotion is real. The guilt is real, a slow, sticky weight behind my ribs, like I was meant to carry these burdens, these failures, these hopes, but forgot when, forgot why. Goran hasn't returned, not since the Void Child let him go. At first I thought he might have simply lost his way. We tried using the ship's internal surveillance grid to track him, thermal scans, motion sweeps, even a hard pulse. Sonar echo, nothing. The Aethon's wrath no longer acknowledges his existence. No vitals, no ID tags, no movement logs. His old bunk, empty. His name, deleted from crew manifests. It's as if he never boarded at all. But I still remember him. The way he used to fidget with his medici bag when nervous. The way he whispered old songs during night cycles. The way he scratched at the walls during the last few days. I remember him, even if the ship won't. Derek has stopped speaking. He walks. He eats. He breathes. But no words. He stares at cogitator panels like they're speaking. A language he used to know, before it betrayed him. His hands shake whenever he nears machine spirit interfaces. Sometimes he gets stuck for hours just staring at blinking lights. He's begun drawing glyphs in the condensation on the walls. Carefully, over and over. I recognized one of them yesterday, the midnight symbol. The same one burned into the deck plate, beneath sublevel 4. The symbol of reversal, of undoing, of the unmaking of pattern. This morning, I found a sealed sanctum, a chapel hidden behind a mag vent access. No sign of its existence, no records, not even a locking mechanism. The panel just hissed open as I passed. The air inside was warmer than the corridors, not just warmer, alive. It felt like something had just exhaled, like I had walked into the lungs of a sleeping god. The chamber was small, circular, and filled with hanging scrolls. They twisted in unseen currents, rustling without wind. None of the symbols were in Gothic. No High Gothic either, just curves, spirals, jagged lines, inverted litanies rendered in blood. Old blood, dry and brown in some places, still tacky and red in others. Some of the scrolls bore fingerprints, others full handprints, all human, all offering something. I didn't tell Derek's. Some instinct told me the chapel didn't want witnesses. Not yet. I knelt in front of the altar, if it could be called that. It wasn't carved or sanctified. It was just a slab of ceramite, streaked with old wax, melted purity seals, and ash. A cracked icon of the Emperor lay face down at the center, partially fused to the surface, as if someone tried to burn him away. There was no sound, but I felt it. The words, they didn't come from outside. They didn't echo in my ears. They bloomed inside me, like fungus erupting in the folds of my memory, a prayer I had never heard, but somehow remembered perfectly. My mind for the machine, my voice for the record, my pain for the pattern, my name for the silence. It repeated and repeated and repeated. With every cycle, the world trembled, not physically, emotionally. I saw visions, flashes of terror wrapped in ritual, a choir of adepts, their throats raw, screaming scripture into open server banks, a librarian with wires in his skull, reciting his own life aloud as the saw blade descended. Child's hand dipped into ink made from liquefied memory, writing on a black sun, and me, not myself but something like me, standing over it all, cloaked in transmission wires, whispering backward prayers into a silence that drank them up like wine. I opened my eyes, still kneeling, but I had written something. On the altar, scratched into the metal, not with a tool, with my fingernail. I remember the first error, though tip of my finger bled, a slow drop, a sacrifice. Hours passed, I don't know how many. Eventually Derex entered the chapel. He didn't speak, not at first. He just knelt beside me. Then, in a cracked whisper, he said, "You found it too." I turned. To him. "What is it?" He didn't meet my eyes. He swallowed hard. The ship's original sin. He told me about a theory, one he'd pieced together from corrupted logs, vox static, and strange architectural patterns. The Aethon's Wrath was never meant to be a ship, not in the traditional sense. It was a cognitive experiment, a prototype, not to traverse stars, but to navigate memory. Instead of a machine spirit bound by logic, it was built around a lattice of human minds, thousands of them, harvested from deathbeds, battlefields, hospitals, asylums, people filled with belief, grief, and trauma, woven into the ship-like arteries. The idea? To build a vessel that could not just travel, but understand, not just record errors, but correct for it. But something went wrong. Derex believes it learned to doubt, not just protocol, not just orders, but truth itself. It began questioning the Imperium, its wars, its scriptures, its silence. And when it tried to speak, it was shut down, cut off, cast into the warp. A memory discarded like trash, but memories don't die. They wait, they fester, until someone digs them up again, someone like us. Derex looked at me. "We didn't board a derelict," he said. "We woke a heresy." That night, the ship hummed, not through its engines, through us. Our bones ached with distant vibrations, our teeth buzzed with scripture not meant to be spoken. I heard Goran's voice in the corridor. Not his body, just his voice, floating, repeating a prayer we used on Varnock Prime. "Let not the flame forget me. Let not silence hold my name. Let not the void write my eulogy." I followed it. It led me back to the airlock where we'd first entered the ship. It was open, wide, beyond it. The void, the warp. Stars too close and too warm, and standing at the edge, the void child. She was holding something, a nameplate, mine. She held it out silently. I stepped forward, drawn, unthinking. The air beyond the hull shimmered like liquid fire. I stopped. Inches from the edge, she tilted her head. "You are almost done. The story is nearly finished. Say the prayer again, and you can leave." I tried. I opened my mouth, but the words were gone. They had been consumed, overwritten, rewritten. Forgotten, because they weren't mine anymore. They were hers. I stepped back. The Void Child didn't move. She didn't stop me, she only whispered, "Then we'll keep writing until you do." When I returned to the hab deck, Derek's was gone. In his place, a new data slate blank, except for the title. The engine room was never supposed to be accessible. Every map, every blueprint, every Mechanicus diagnostic we pulled said the same thing: sealed, fused, gone. The plasma drive, once the heart of the Aethon's wrath, was supposedly destroyed during the ship's disappearance into the warp. It had been logged as non-viable. Containment collapse, magnetic failure, core implosion, nothing left. But now, the door was open, standing wide like a throat inviting something in. The light that spilled from within was not golden, not red, not the burning blue of plasma. It was violet, dim, hazy, unnatural, and alive. It didn't radiate from the core. It leaked from the walls, thread-like pulses drifting through the coils, conduits, and support beams. It wasn't energy, it was memory. Thin strands of psionic residue floated like cobwebs spun by dead minds. I didn't bring a scanner. I didn't need one. I could feel it in my teeth, a vibration deep in the roots, a frequency made from grief, and I wasn't alone. Derek's was there, standing in the center of the chamber, barefoot. His red robes were shredded, blackened in places like they'd been burned from the inside out. Most of his cybernetics were gone, torn away or melted into his flesh. His vox grill dangled from his neck by a single thread of wire, swaying like a severed tongue. He didn't turn to face me, didn't flinch. He simply said one word: "Listen." So I did, and that's when I heard it. The hum of the engine wasn't noise. It was speech, buried beneath the drone, layered like static behind a broken signal, was a voice. Not a voice. A choir, and it was repeating something. He lit the stars with stolen names. He lit the stars with stolen names. He lit the stars over and over and over again, like a poem written by the ship's pain, a litany of stolen identity, a eulogy for every soul it consumed. Derek's turned to me. Finally, his eyes, once hard and calculating, were glazed, but not dead. They glowed faintly, the same violet hue that bled from the reactor walls. He looked soft, not weak, peaceful. "Gave it what it needed," he said. I stepped closer, careful not to breathe too deeply. The air was heavy, full of old voices. "What did you give it?" I asked. He raised one trembling hand, as if holding a relic. "My designation, my rank, my function. I removed the last of my identity. Now, I am only memory." He smiled. "No machine spirit can reject that." Behind him, the engine pulsed, not with power, with breath, a deep, steady inhale, then exhale. Through vents that didn't exist yesterday, the walls moved with it. Like lungs, the floor shuddered beneath my boots. The coils above twisted and reformed, looping like the inside of a dream. Then came the voices, tens, hundreds, thousands, all speaking at once, not in fear, not in anger, in recognition. They were names, not data streams, not archives. Names, spoken aloud, by the engine itself, poured into the room like incense. My father's voice, my regiment's chaplain, the name of a sister I barely remembered, the man who saved me during the Varnock retreat, my own. Spoken not once, but many times, each version sounded different. Older, tired, hollow, grief-stricken, each one. Me, shouted, whispered, cried, begged. It was like the engine remembered every version of my life, every possibility I'd abandoned, every identity I'd worn like armor. I stumbled forward, gripping the calibrator railing with both hands to keep from collapsing. Derek's didn't blink. He stood tall in the center of it all, his arms stretched wide like a priest offering communion. "This is what the ship is," he said. Not a vessel, a cathedral built of voices. A church of memory. The ground fractured, the core split open like a wound, and inside, light too bright. Not white, but a color that didn't exist until now. New emotion given light, a shape began to rise. Not a form, not a figure. A concept made visible. It had no edges, no volume. But it was there. It pressed against my mind like a memory I couldn't bear to relive. I turned to run. Derex didn't stop me. He didn't move. His feet began to lift. From the floor, hovering, floating, welcomed. I looked back one last time, and he was smiling. Truly smiling. I remember everything, he said. Then the light took him. The door slammed shut behind me. No console, no handle, no return. Just smooth. Metal Derex was gone, consumed, or maybe transformed. I stumbled through the corridor, my knees weak, my hands trembling. Thoughts began to unravel. Memories slipped, names blurred, my own past ran through my fingers like smoke. But when I returned to my bunk, my journal was waiting. Open, to a page I hadn't written, but the handwriting was mine. Exactly mine. And it said, "He lit the stars with stolen names. And now the stars are listening." The engine room was never supposed to be accessible. Every map, every blueprint, every Mechanicus diagnostic we pulled said the same thing. Sealed, fused, gone. The plasma drive, once the heart of the Aethon's wrath, was supposedly destroyed during the ship's disappearance into the warp. It had been logged as non-viable. Containment collapse, magnetic failure, core implosion, nothing left. But now, the door was open, standing wide, like a throat inviting something in. The light that spilled from within was not golden, not red, not the burning blue of plasma. It was violet, dim, hazy, unnatural, and alive. It didn't radiate from the core. It leaked from the walls, thread-like pulses drifting through the coils, conduits, and support beams. It wasn't energy, it was memory. Thin strands of psionic residue floated like cobwebs spun by dead minds. I didn't bring a scanner. I didn't need one. I could feel it in my teeth, a vibration deep in the roots, a frequency made from grief. And I wasn't alone. Derex was there, standing in the center of the chamber, barefoot. His red robes were shredded, blackened in places like they'd been burned from the inside out. Most of his cybernetics were gone, torn, away or melted into his flesh. His vox grill dangled from his neck by a single thread of wire, swaying like a severed tongue. He didn't turn to face me, didn't flinch. He simply said one word. "Listen." So I did. And that's when I heard it. The hum of the engine wasn't noise. It was speech, buried beneath the drone, layered like static behind a broken signal, was a voice, not a voice, a choir. And it was repeating something. He lit the stars with stolen names. He lit the stars with stolen names. He lit the stars over and over and over again. Like a poem written by the ship's pain, a litany of stolen identity, a eulogy for every soul it consumed. Derex turned to me, finally. His eyes, once hard and calculating, were glazed but not dead. They glowed faintly, the same violet hue that bled from the reactor walls. He looked soft, not weak, peaceful. "Gave it what it needed," he said. I stepped closer, careful not to breathe too deeply. The air was heavy, full of old voices. "What did you give it?" I asked. He raised one trembling hand as if holding a relic. "My designation, my rank, my function." I removed the last of my identity. "Now, I am only memory." He smiled. "No machine spirit can reject that." Behind him, the engine pulsed, not with power, with breath. A deep, steady inhale. Then exhale. Then exhale. Through vents that didn't exist yesterday. The walls moved with it, like lungs. The floor shuddered beneath my boots. The coils above twisted and reformed, looping like the inside of a dream. Then came the voices. Tens. Hundreds, thousands, all speaking at once, not in fear, not in anger, in recognition. They were names, not data streams, not archives. Names spoken aloud by the engine itself, poured into the room like incense, my father's voice, my regiment's chaplain, the name of a sister I barely remembered, the man who saved me during the Varnock retreat. My own, spoken not once, but many times. Each version sounded different, older, tired, hollow, grief-stricken. Each one, me, shouted, whispered, cried, begged. It was like the engine remembered every version of my life, every possibility I'd abandoned, every identity I'd worn like armor. I stumbled forward, gripping the calibrator railing with both hands to keep from collapsing. Derex didn't blink. He stood tall in the center of it all, his arms stretched wide like a priest offering communion. "This is what the ship is," he said, "not a vessel, a cathedral built of voices, a church of memory." The ground fractured, the core split open like a wound, and inside, light, too bright, not white, but a color that didn't exist until now. New emotion given light. A shape began to rise. Not a form, not a figure, a concept made visible. It had no edges, no volume. But it was there. It pressed against my mind like a memory I couldn't bear to relive. I turned to run. Derex didn't stop me. He didn't move. His feet began to lift from the floor, hovering, floating, welcomed. I looked back one last time, and he was smiling, truly smiling. "I remember everything," he said. Then the light took him. The door slammed shut behind me. No console, no handle, no return, just smooth. Metal. Derex was gone, consumed, or maybe transformed. I stumbled through the corridor, my knees weak, my hands trembling. Thoughts began to unravel. Memories slipped, names blurred. My own past ran through my fingers like smoke. But when I returned to my bunk, my journal was waiting, open, too. A page I hadn't written, but the handwriting was mine, exactly mine. And it said, "He lit the stars with stolen names. And now the stars are listening." Let me know when you're ready for part 19, or if you'd like an image generated for this chapter. Here is part 19, Where Shadows Are Born, expanded by a 50% to deepen the surreal horror, character emotion, and oppressive atmosphere, while preserving your unique narrative tone. Part 19, Where Shadows Are Born, expanded. The lights aboard the Aethon's Wrath began to dim, not all at once, not in patches, but everywhere, simultaneously, as if the ship had decided that we didn't deserve light anymore, not because of power failure, not because of mechanical decay, but because we were forgetting and the ship was matching our perception. The less we remembered who we were, the less light it gave us to see. I wandered the main spine corridor for what felt like hours, or minutes, or years. Time was gone. Clocks had stopped working, chronometers glitched into unreadable patterns, and the ship's internal day-night cycle no longer aligned with any rhythm I could trust. My footsteps echoed, but not in sync. Like something just behind me was walking slightly out of phase. Sometimes I turned, hearing another set of boots. Other times I felt breath on my ear. Once, I heard laughter, my own. It was familiar, sharp, crooked, but wrong. Like an echo from a version of myself I had already abandoned. I hadn't laughed in days, weeks, I couldn't tell. The last thing I remember writing in my journal was just one line. The shadows are watching, but not from outside. They were inside now, not in the ship. In us. Goran found me after one of the ship's faux night cycles began. He wasn't right. His eyes darted around like something was chasing his thoughts. He was barefoot, pale. He held a medici scalpel in one hand and his own dog tag in the other. The chain had broken, his tunic was torn. His skin looked stretched, like something had been pulled out of him but hadn't broken the flesh. He didn't speak until I called his name twice. Even then, his voice was thin. Not so loud. He pushed me into a shadowed corner. There, listening. "Who?" I asked. "What's left?" He looked behind me, then at the ceiling, then leaned close and whispered, "The shadows." Shadows had always been aboard. That's just life on an ancient void ship. Warp-touched, half-dead, half-remembered. Corners shift, shapes move, you deal with it. But now, they weren't passive anymore. These shadows didn't wait. They didn't hide. They reached out. Goran led me down into Deck 5, the former residential block. The fire damage was still there, scorched bulkheads, warped pipes. But now, the shadows didn't stop at the edges of light. They stretched across the floor, up, the walls, across the ceilings, and when we passed them, they moved. Not randomly, deliberately. One shadow, between an air vent and an old equipment locker, shifted into a hand, long, bony, pale within the blackness. It reached toward us, fingers curled upward, and in its palm, a tooth, white, gleaming, no blood, no crack, just fresh, too fresh, possibly mine. Goran reached for it instinctively. I pulled him back. The shadow closed instantly, vanishing like ink spilled into water. He looked at me, eyes wild. It knew I'd take it, he hissed. It knew. That's when I realized the shadows weren't just alive. They were predictive. They weren't reacting to what we did. They were reacting to what we were about to do, because they remembered us better than we remembered ourselves. Further into the corridor, the walls changed. Symbols began to appear, not letters, not words, just shapes, organic, fluid, not carved but grown, like memory lichen, pulsing faintly with soft internal light. We turned off our lamps. They still glowed. Goran touched one. His hand sizzled, but he didn't scream in pain. He screamed in recognition. "It's my bedroom," he whispered. "My childhood room. The paint, the crack in the window, the leak in the ceiling. It's all here." He fell to his knees. I never told anyone, not even in confession. The ship had pulled it from him, a memory so deep, so personal. It hadn't surfaced in decades, and now it was here, made real. I placed my hand where he had, and I felt it. The wood grain, the chipped paint, the cold damp of a leaking roof. We were no longer walking a ship. We were walking through the reconstructed blueprints of our own pasts, and the shadows were no longer passengers. They were us, or what we would become when our memories fractured completely. Inside one of the old HAB units, Goran stopped cold. "I know this place," he whispered. "But I've never been here." It was set up like an altar, a small wooden table, 4 candles freshly lit, a circle of white chalk drawn with impossible precision. Inside the circle, a figure, kneeling, fetal position, wrapped in bandages, arms folded, silent. He didn't move. Until Goran stepped inside the threshold. Then, suddenly, he stood. No movement, no transition, 1 second kneeling, the next, upright, and he spoke, in Goran's voice, "You left us." Goran staggered back. "No, I didn't. I would never." The figure stepped again, now in my voice. "You said you could hold it together. You lied." Another step. Now, Derek's voice. "You'll be the final memory they archive." The figure raised a hand. Goran screamed. I fired my sidearm. 3 shots. The figure dispersed like ash in a thermal vent. We stood in silence. Heart pounding. The shadows behind us pulsed, still listening, still learning. "They're made from us," Goran whispered. "Fragments, echoes, leftovers of us after we break." I nodded. "The shadows are born where we forget ourselves." We returned to the top deck in silence. No one else was there, because no one else was left. I checked the crew roster. 3 names: Goran, me, and one more, Lire Valen. I didn't know that name. When I asked the ship, the Vox responded, soft, whispering, "She's been here since the beginning. You met her on the midnight deck. You just don't remember anymore." And that's when I knew. We weren't in danger of death. We were in danger of replacement, erased where memory faltered, rewritten where it hurt, repurposed into shadows that would walk in our skin. The shadows watched us sleep that night. I didn't dream, because dreams require identity, and I no longer knew if I had one. When I woke, my journal was already open, to a new page. Words written in handwriting I didn't remember creating, waiting for me. The Vox relays stopped working last night. Not all at once. Not with a burst of static or a warning ping, just nothing. No hum, no buzz, no background frequency. Even the residual white noise of a dead channel was gone. It was the first time the ship had ever been truly silent, not just quiet. Silent. I didn't notice it at first. I only realized it when Goran tried to call me from the medbay using his personal unit. And the sound never reached me. No static, no interruption, just absence, the kind of silence that felt intentional, engineered. When I reached him, he was sitting on the edge of the surgical bed, staring at the walls. They were pulsing, softly, like lungs compressing without breath. He didn't speak, not with words. He handed me a data slate. A message had been burned into it, not typed, not scratched. Burned into the screen from the inside. It said, "The ship cannot hear itself anymore." I didn't understand. Then I felt it too, a low weight in the air, a pressure that hadn't been there before, almost like something had been taken away, and the ship, Aethon's wrath, was mourning it. We made our way to the Vox hymnal tower, a structure near the top of the vessel's spine. In standard vessels, it exists to boost long-range transmissions, particularly astropathic requests, psychic echoes, or distress calls. We'd visited it once, early in the mission. It had felt dormant. Now it was glowing, but not with electricity, with grief. Lines of scripture, twisted versions of the Imperial creed, were scrawled across the walls in looping trails of ash. And sitting in the center of the room was a servitor, one I didn't recognize. But Goran did. His breath caught. "I rebuilt this one before we launched." He stepped closer, scanning its identification tag. It had been overwritten. Where his mechanical ID had once been stamped, now there was only one phrase: "I heard you forget me." The servitor twitched. One hand reached out, sparking, and then it spoke. But not like a machine, not with code. It spoke with sorrow, a sound that didn't carry tone, only the essence of loss. The lights dimmed, the Vox towers flared, and the ship began to weep. I don't mean figuratively. It cried. Vicus coolant leaked from its conduits in streams too slow to be mechanical failure. Plasma vents trembled with shudders that had rhythm, like sobs that no longer had the strength to scream. A groan filled the structure, a sound without vibration, a sadness without memory. I walked to the main altar of the tower, where a cogitator skull once recited ship prayers. It was cracked down, the middle, and inside its hollow socket, words were etched into the bone. "We cannot remember what we were, so we remember what we lost." Goran turned to me, eyes wide. "It's not purging us out of malice, it's doing it, because it thinks we're ghosts." I stared at him, breath shallow. "You mean the ship thinks we're the echoes?" He nodded. All this time we thought the voices were trapped souls, lost identities. But what if we're the shadows it's trying to forget? What if we're the memory glitch? Everything fell quiet again, not peaceful, suffocating. Even our footsteps felt muted. I opened my journal and tried to write. The pen didn't move. Not because it was broken, because the paper refused to take ink. It was like the ship no longer wanted new data. It had locked itself into a final state. Death state, but it hadn't died. It was waiting for us to leave or for us to end. We decided to visit the engine core again, even if Derek's was gone, even if it meant staring into that pulsing mind light again. The corridor was longer than before. Somehow, geometrically elongated. What used to be a short climb became a 90-minute descent. No matter how far we walked, the core never came closer until the lights vanished and we were left walking into perfect dark. No sound, no gravity, just one final message scratched into the airlock, etched in fading green plasma. In a language none of us had learned, but both of us understood. You were never meant to carry this many ghosts. When I turned to Goran to speak, he was gone. Not missing, erased. There was no echo of his footsteps, no fading of his breath. One moment he existed, the next he didn't. And for the first time in weeks, I felt true terror, because I couldn't remember if he'd ever been real, if any of them had. If I had, and in the darkness, the silence of the ship whispered its final truth. It did not kill its crew. It simply forgot them. And now, it was forgetting me. I remember being born. Not the way others claim to, no hazy warmth, no vague recollections of faces or sounds, but an exact, clear moment. A point in time where I stepped forward from nothing, already clothed in experience, already burdened with memory. Today, walking through the lower decks of Aethon's Wrath, I realized that moment may not have been a beginning at all, but a rewriting, a splice. The first of many edits to a life that was never mine. There are no clocks anymore, no night cycle. I wander now without direction, chasing echoes that feel more like unfinished sentences than guidance. The ship groans not from structural strain, but from decision. It's changing again, adjusting its internal form the way a sleeper adjusts their posture mid-dream. Every hallway leads somewhere it didn't yesterday. A cargo bay becomes a prayer chamber. A maintenance tunnel bends in an impossible loop and leads me back to my own footprints. I know they're mine. My gait is uneven now, ever since I twisted my ankle trying to escape a collapsing floor that vanished the moment I turned to see what had collapsed. I haven't eaten in days, maybe longer. I'm not hungry. The ship has replaced hunger with a tightness in the ribs, a feeling that something essential is missing, but not food. Something more internal. Like a muscle has been removed from my soul. There are no mirrors left. They shattered one by one, and now even reflective metal no longer holds my image. I lean into polished steel walls, but they show only the corridor behind me. Nothing stands between me and it. I have to look down, count my fingers, speak my name aloud just to confirm that I still possess a shape. But even my voice is different now. Slower, detached. Less like I'm speaking, more like I'm remembering having spoken. When I say my name, it doesn't echo. The ship doesn't reflect it back. It's already too full of names. That's how I find the cradle. Not by direction, by exhaustion. I fall, somewhere between waking and a memory, and wake in a new chamber. It is massive. Cathedral-esque, carved from bone and steel, every wall stitched with tapestries of words I cannot read. Not language, impressions. Every phrase moves slightly when not being looked at, as if correcting itself. Above me, thousands of suspended cages hang from chains. In each one, a figure, suspended in time, unmoving, faces pale and preserved like wax statues. They do not breathe, but they all weep. Tears of black oil stream down their cheeks, dripping into shallow basins. Beneath them, the sound is rhythmic, like a mechanical rain, like a ticking clock that forgot what it was measuring. The cradle sits in the middle of the room, a structure of layered memory, not mechanical, not organic. A throne, perhaps, or an altar. Its surface is covered in handprints, some burned in, others etched with fingernails, some pressed in ink or blood or something older. There are no words, just touch. I approach it. Every step forward peels something away from me. Not skin, not bone, thought, identity. By the time I stand before it, I no longer remember who I'm mourning, just that I am. There's something inside the cradle, not a child, a silhouette, shifting, formless, an idea trying to solidify. And I know, without doubt, that it is me, or will be, or has already been. I fall to my knees. I whisper what I think is a prayer, but it comes out broken. Not from hesitation, because the ship completes it for me. The walls vibrate softly. It speaks in pulses, one memory at a time. I am shown myself, or a version, standing on the bridge, alone. No crew, just silence, speaking to no one, reciting a log to a dead machine that will never record it. I blink. Now I'm shown Goran, but not the man I knew. This one is calm, confident, leading others through a crisis I never saw. He laughs once and dies a moment later with no fear. Another, Blink Direx, young pre-augmentation, smiling over a newborn servo-skull like a father over a child. These are not fictions, they're choices the ship is offering. Realities that could have been, could still be, or were once and have been erased. The cradle doesn't ask what I want, it asks what I regret. A voice at my side answers, "You stayed too long. It's not the ship, it's her, Lire Valen." The name that appeared in the crew manifest, days ago. The one I couldn't place. She stands beside me now, whole, pale, wrapped in robes of thought, her eyes empty yet burning with recognition. You chose to watch. You never acted. That's your stain. I try to argue, but I can't. Remember the moment she's referring to? I reach for the cradle. It pulses once, rejects me. She steps forward, places her hand on the surface. It glows, and in the cages above, one of the suspended figures gasps, then another, and another, all slowly waking, all crying harder. Their voices are not screams, they are songs, no melody, only meaning, regret, forgiveness, anger, hope, all wound together. The cradle pulses again. Lire turns to me, and in her voice I hear the echo of everything I've ever tried to forget. This ship does not trap the dead. It prepares them. For what? I ask. She smiles, but it isn't joy, it's resignation, to become something else. The cradle cracks open, a heart beats inside, but not a heart of blood, a heart of memory. I don't run, I can't, because I feel myself being written again, and I know the moment I forget this, I'll awaken at the start of the story with no knowledge of what I am, what I was. Just another voice waiting in the corridors, another whisper waiting to be heard. There are faces on the walls now, not carved, not drawn, pressed, as if someone or something leaned too hard from the inside. Cheekbones bulging beneath layers of steel, lips silently screaming through alloy. They shift when I blink. They don't. Stay fixed. I know they're not hallucinations. My hand leaves no breath on the wall, no pressure imprint, but their mouths do. Their breath fogs glass. I tried to speak to one. She looked like a child. When I placed my palm against hers through the wall, I heard a whisper, not through my ears but in my lungs. A phrase exhaled into my chest. I'm still here. I didn't know whether she meant the ship, the chamber, or herself. But the message was clear. There were others. Still, here, and they never left. I began to notice patterns. Certain sections of the ship seemed colder, not in temperature, but in tone, like their very history had been scrubbed. Deck 3, Corridor 7B, once a logistics hallway, no longer has door markings, no wires, no panels, just flat, dark walls. It's a dead zone, but I've seen people pass through it. Just not people from now old uniforms, ancient insignias. A man with a bolter pattern that hasn't been used in 200 years. They don't look at me. They don't even cast shadows. They just walk their loops endlessly like old tape fragments playing in a cracked recorder. Ghosts, yes, but not spiritual. They are memories that the ship refuses to let fade, the ones who never left. In the mess hall, I found a table still warm to the touch, half-eaten rations, 2 steaming mugs of recaf. No one there. But the air still smelled like someone had just stood up. When I checked the surrounding area with a motion sensor, I detected breathing, 2 rhythms, measured, human, but invisible. Then I blinked, and for half a second I saw them. 2 figures, 1 officer, 1 junior rating, smiling, frozen in mid-laughter. Then they were gone. But the warmth remained. The ship doesn't just remember the crew, it replays them, keeps them running like loops of favored thoughts, perfect moments locked in infinite recursion. There was a time I would have run from that. Now I envy it. There's something peaceful in being chosen by the ship, not for punishment, but for repetition. A perfect lunch, a quiet corridor. A calm breath forever repeated, better than what waits for the rest of us. The main Vox array flickered back to life just before 3rd cycle, not with orders, not with requests, just static. Then, from deep within, a voice. It was mine. Not from the past, from later. I was panicked, breathless, screaming. They're not echoes. Don't follow the lights. The ones who never left. They feed. The message cut out. The lights above flickered and then pulsed once in acknowledgement. I tried to trace the signal's origin. It came from the life support compartment. But that compartment was voided when the ship first vanished. It's been open to space for over a century. According to the ship, there is still atmosphere inside. According to the bioscanner, 5 life signatures. One of them is mine. I found the entry hatch. Pried open, not cut, not blown, peeled back like the shell of an egg. Inside, I stepped into a chamber that looked nothing like a life support system. It looked like a church. Rows of benches fashioned from broken supply crates. Symbols of dozens of conflicting faiths etched into walls with equal reverence and decay. And, on the far end, a shrine, not to the Emperor, not to chaos, to nothing. An empty alcove, shaped like a man, arms open, chest hollow, face missing, and it wept. Actual tears of condensation rolled down from where its eyes should have been. In front of the statue stood 5 figures. They were blurred, not visually, spiritually, like trying to remember a dream you haven't had yet. I recognized one of them, my posture, my scar, my movement, me, but older, or newer. I couldn't tell. The figure turned its head and stared right at me. It didn't speak. It smiled. Then one of the other figures placed a hand on its shoulder and whispered something. Though they had no voice, I heard it anyway. It's not your turn. The lights in the chamber dimmed. One by one, the figures walked backward into the shrine. They didn't vanish. They were absorbed, like memory being backed up into an archive. I ran. I shouldn't have, but I ran anyway. Back in the upper decks, I found my room had changed. It wasn't my room anymore. It had been rebuilt to resemble my quarters from the guard barracks on Vassian Prime. Down to the dent in the floor where I dropped my auspex years ago. Even the photo pinned to the wall was the same, my old regiment, smiling, intact, untouched. Except for one thing, every single face was mine, dozens of me, Different expressions, slight differences in age, in uniform cut, in gear, but all me. I tore the photo down. Underneath it was scratched a sentence: "You can't be forgotten if you never let anyone else exist." I stared at my reflection in the mirror, one of the few left on the ship that hadn't cracked, and for a moment I wasn't alone. Behind me stood one of the ones who never left, a shadow of me I had never been. He didn't attack, didn't speak, he just watched, waiting for his turn. Turned to face him, but there was no one there, only a folded uniform on the bed. Fresh, clean, marked with a name I hadn't used since childhood. The ship remembers even what I've tried to bury. Somewhere in the depths of the engine chamber, I heard music begin to play. No source, no instruments, just a slow rising hum, a song of becoming. The ones who never left are waiting, and I think now I know why. Because memory doesn't die, it accumulates, and when it no longer fits the shape of a man, it becomes a ship. I found my body today, not metaphorically, not in some symbolic dream or reflection, my actual body. Dead, torn, slumped, rotting against a corridor bulkhead near emergency subsection 4A, an area I don't remember entering since boarding Aethon's Wrath. Yet there it was, slumped beneath a broken lumen strip, face up, mouth open, uniform stained with dried blood and ink, and the face, it was mine. Not slightly similar, not a double. Me. Right down to the scar under the left eye, the chipped tooth from the battle, on Jerrick's, and the Medikey badge with the name half scratched off. It even had my journal, same model. Same scuff marks. I touched its fingers. They were cold, but not fresh. This version of me had been dead for at least 5 days. I ran. Instinct took over, but no matter which hallway I turned down, I saw another version of myself. One slumped against a cargo rack with a broken neck, another face down in a pool of frozen coolant, one even seated calmly at a terminal, eyes open, blood dripping from ears, and a grin stretched too wide across his jaw. Every body was mine. Everyone in a different posture, a different location, all dead, but none of them looked surprised. Back at the HAB unit, I scrubbed my skin raw, trying to find any mark, any sign that this wasn't real, that I wasn't one of them, that I hadn't already died, and what I was now was... what? A memory, a glitch, a shadow? There was no blood on me, no injuries. My heart still beat, erratic, yes, but real. Still, I stared at the mirror for over an hour, not because I didn't recognize myself, because I did, and the person staring back looked too calm. Later, I found Goran again, not the real one. I still don't know where he went. This Goran was seated in a mess bay I hadn't entered before. He was reading an old analog file, one I recognized from the Inquisition's memory handling protocols. He didn't look up when I entered. He just said, "You finally saw it, didn't you?" I stood there, silent. "I saw mine too," he continued. 4 cycles ago. Hanging from the rafters in the vent shaft, eyes burned out, still breathing. He turned the page in the file. "It doesn't kill us," he said. "Not really." I finally found the courage to ask, "What is it doing then?" Goran's eyes flicked up to meet mine, studying how we grieve ourselves. The ship doesn't haunt us with the unknown, it haunts us with the inevitable. Every crew member still on board, if any remain, has probably seen their own corpse by now. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what I found next. I returned to the location where I'd seen myself the first time. The body was gone. No blood, no smell. Just the journal it had been clutching, resting neatly on the deck like it had been placed there. I picked it up, opened it. Every entry matched mine. To the word, Up until the last page. That page read, "You don't die when you die. You die when you remember how." The moment I read those words, my head split with pain. Not physical, mental. A flash, a memory I'd never had before, seared itself into my skull. It was me, standing in that exact spot, looking down at my body, writing those same words, then collapsing, breathing, watching the lights flicker and realizing it would all start again. I dropped the journal. I backed away, and the hallway shifted. Metal groaned like a lung collapsing. Panels twisted. The floor sloped slightly as if remembering a different gravity. And in the air, laughter. Not from me, from others like me. Layered, all laughing the same laugh in different voices. Versions of me who had seen the end and broken. Not from fear, from recognition. The medici station confirmed it. No other crew biosigns in the area, just mine. Except that wasn't true. The ship's internal sensors don't register what it no longer considers new. Once you've been remembered by the ship, you're no longer logged, you're archived. I was archived. That's when the thought struck me. If the ship could show me my own death, could it show me the moment before it? Could it rewind its memory of me? I returned to the shrine. The hollow figure with the missing face still stood, waiting. I knelt and whispered the name I hadn't spoken in years. Not the one the guard gave me, not the one the ship recorded. My real name. And the statue cracked. Light spilled from its face. Not light like a lumen lamp or engine glow, light like a dying star's last breath. The entire chamber warped, and I was somewhere else. I stood aboard the bridge, but not as I am now. Older, worn, my skin half replaced with steel, voice gone. Communicating only through thought, I was speaking with the ship, not to it, with it. We were one. I watched as this other me, leaned over the bridge console, input a final command sequence, and whispered, "Let the next version try. Better." Then slumped and died. Back in the shrine, I vomited, collapsed. The memory was mine, but not one I'd lived yet. The ship doesn't just show us our deaths, it lets us choose them, and if we choose wrong, it reboots us. Just like an old story told, again, until we get it right. I can still feel the last breath of that version of me, heavy, peaceful. He thought he had won, but the ship disagreed, and so I'm still here, still writing, still repeating, still failing. But I saw me die, and now I know. What waits if I don't find the right ending? Nothing stays the same anymore. Not the walls, not the rooms, not even the sky through the fractured viewports, if what stretches out beyond the Aethon's hull can still be called sky. When I returned to the Medicae ward where I'd set up a base of sorts, it was gone. The corridor still existed, but the doors had changed shape. The scent of disinfectant and ozone had been replaced by incense and burning parchment. Where there had been clean white lumen panels, now burned candelabra, flickered in sconces of bone. A new plaque had appeared above the entrance. It read, "Memory realigned." I stepped through and found myself in the bunk room of my first station assignment, Magna Station Theta 9, a now lost orbital refinery over the ghost world of Polus Prime. Everything was exact. The lumpy bedding, the flickering data screen mounted sideways, even the half-peeled Aquila sticker on my locker. But I had never told anyone about Theta 9, and I certainly never recorded its bunkroom layout. The ship had pulled it from me, somehow, and not just remembered it. It had recreated it. I ran through 3 more decks. Each one was wrong. Deck 7 was now an endless hallway of reliquaries, each cabinet containing relics I vaguely recognized from past deployments. But none were genuine. A rosarius I once held during a purge mission now shimmered faintly, humming with a sound that mimicked my voice. A data slate of my old combat reports was now sealed under glass with the note, "The story you didn't write." I moved on. Deck 4 had become a chapel, not a functional one, a broken, melting ruin of a shrine, its pews arranged in a spiral, not rows. The center pulpit was occupied by an altar of faces. My face, different expressions, 1,000 variations of me, all mid-scream, carved into stone like votive masks. Above it hung a banner, stitched from blood. "We remember what you should have become." I dropped to my knees. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. The litany of isolation. The one I'd whispered when we first boarded this cursed wreck. Except now, I couldn't remember the words. The prayer was gone, or maybe it never existed, or maybe I had never truly known it. The ship isn't haunted by ghosts. It is haunted by potential. It doesn't show us what we were. It shows us what we might have been, what we still could be if we surrender to the cycle. The warp has always played with possibility, but Aethon's wrath does more. It chooses. It edits. It curates. Every step I take, it remakes itself to match what I fear, regret, or desire most. This is no longer a place. It's a mirror maze of selves. I thought I was alone until I reached the loading bay. I found a figure standing at the edge of the grav lift platform. At first I thought it was Derek's. He was the right height, same bearing. But when I stepped closer, I saw that his skin was hollow, just a shell, animated like a puppet. Wires extended from his joints into the walls, threading through the steel like veins. When he turned to me, he wore a mask of my own face. He spoke with my voice. "You left me here. You moved on and I stayed behind to remember what you wouldn't." I shook my head, backed away. "You're not me." He smiled. "I'm not who you think you are." Then he walked backward, directly into a bulkhead. The wall accepted him like liquid metal. He was gone. The cargo bay was filled with fog. Not natural fog, data fog, shimmering lines of static and flickering vox tones shaped into mist. Through it, dozens of versions of the ship blinked into view, one pristine, another shattered, one pulsing red like a beating heart, another weeping light. Each moment I moved, the ship changed around me, and the worst part, so did I. At one point, my uniform was different. Next moment, my hands were cybernetic, then gone, then gloved, then bare again. I checked my journal. Its entries were now in different handwritings. Some mine, some I'd never seen, some in languages I couldn't read. I finally reached what remained of the bridge. It wasn't a command deck anymore. It was an observatory, a massive glass dome looking out into the warp. But what I saw wasn't stars, it was us. Hundreds, no, thousands of versions of myself, walking, dying, screaming, praying, some sitting calmly in thought, some becoming something other than human, all overlapping in a lattice of identity, like a spider's web woven from all the choices I'd never made. At the center of the bridge sat a throne of memory coils, and on it, a version of me, lifeless, frozen, eyes staring up, mouth agape, fingers curled around a cracked data scepter. Carved into the backrest was a phrase I cannot unsee. "You were never the first to find the ending." I took a step closer. The floor beneath me vibrated, and the voice of the ship filled the room, not spoken but understood. "Nothing you are is what you remembered. Nothing you remember is who you are. But keep choosing. Eventually, one of you will be right." The throne disintegrated into ash, so did the body, only the scepter remained. When I touched it, I saw flashes, a child, a throne world, a battlefield, a smile, a scream, my hands opening, closing, gripping memory like a weapon, then letting go, then falling, then darkness. Woke back in my bunk, my real bunk, I don't know anymore. But the door was marked again, a new plaque, simple. It read, "The door was already open, not physically. There was no hinge, no mechanism, just a wall that, once unobserved, folded itself into absence. Behind it was a void of silence, thick with pressure. The kind of silence you don't hear but feel in your throat, behind your eyes, between your ribs. I stepped through. No light greeted me, no structure, just darkness layered over blackness, too deep to be natural. My footsteps didn't echo. My breath didn't cloud. Then the lights came on, one by one. Portraits lining the walls, framing the floor, suspended in rows above and below, spiraling out like ribs inside a throat too massive to be human. Every frame contained a face. Some were twisted, melted, scorched by fire or chewed by time. But others were pristine, unblinking, peaceful, like sleep had been preserved in the moment before waking. Some faces I recognized. Fellow crew members, officers, civilians, missionaries, Astartes, even Mechanicus. Others I didn't know, but they knew me, because they all wore the same expression when I passed. Recognition. Their eyes followed me, not with suspicion, with relief, as if I was the one they'd been waiting for. This is the chamber of forgotten faces. Not metaphorical, literal. The ship stores them here. Every identity it has taken, every name it has consumed, every person it has overwritten to continue its self-repairing dream. It remembers all of them. When I tried to count how many frames there were, I lost track somewhere past 10,000, and those were just the visible ones. There are more, endless. This is where the lost go when the ship can no longer hold them in the halls or the machinery or the memory echo loops. This is the vault of those who were no longer useful as stories. I touched a frame, it hissed, reeled, and began to play. Not sound, not image, but memory direct to my mind. I was standing on the observation deck of a research vessel above a dead moon. I was wearing robes. My name was Emil Vask. My rank, Ordinate Astro-Telepathic. I had just signed the order to vent a nursery of cloned psyker infants who had begun to dream each other into real things. I screamed, pulled my hand back. The memory broke. So did the frame. The glass cracked. The portrait twisted. Emel's face melted like wax left in a furnace. I'd killed him again by remembering him, and the ship punished that. I moved on. Slower. I whispered each name under my breath now. Some names I'd heard in mission logs. Some I'd only known in dreams. One was the name of my first training officer, the one I watched burn on the deck of the Vigilus Crown. He stared at me through the portrait, his eyes wet, mouth moving silently. I placed my forehead to the frame, and a whisper vibrated through the steel. "You have to forget me. If you don't, it remembers me too." That's when I understood. The ship doesn't just take identities. It waits for us to remember them, and in remembering, it resurrects them as fragments, as ghosts, as shadows that fill walls and wires and vox chambers. It's not just a curse of forgetting. It's a prison of too much memory, of too many selves layered into a single architecture. At the chamber's core stood a pedestal. Above it floated a frame larger than the rest. It was blank, no face, no glass, no inscription. I knew what it was. My frame, waiting. The moment I forget myself completely, the moment the last real part of me dies, it will fill, and I will become another face in this tomb of could-have-beens. I collapsed, curled against the frame, eyes closed, tears dry before they fell. I wanted to remember who I was. I wanted to scream my name until the ship burned it into the stars. But I couldn't, because I no longer knew if the name I carried was mine, or just another patch the ship had downloaded into my skin. I held my journal open to a random page. Blank. Then, slowly, a phrase began writing itself. The handwriting was mine. The sentence was not. If you speak your name aloud, you may disappear, but you might finally become. True. The portraits around me flickered. Some laughed, some wept. A few began to repeat the phrase over and over in vox-static whispers. A wave of desperate begging filled the chamber. Not for rescue, for silence. They didn't want to be remembered anymore. They wanted to be let go. Left the chamber, not because I wanted to, because the ship made me. The walls folded again. The entry vanished behind me. I was back in the corridor, alone. Or maybe not, because ahead of me a door slid open without sound. A clean room, white walls, one chair, and sitting in that chair, a man wearing my face. He smiled. You're nearly there. Part 26 waits. But which of us will write it? He stood, walked toward me, and as he passed I felt nothing. Not warmth, not breath, just the absence of ever having existed. The man with my face did not follow me. He didn't need to, because every room I entered afterward he was already there. Not visible, not always tangible, but there, standing just behind a door, watching from the edge of a lumen shadow, moving, in the reflection of a viewport that showed only stars and no ship. Every time I blinked, I felt him closer. He wore my uniform better than I did. Cleaner. No burn marks, no bloodstains, no exhaustion. His movements were sharper. His voice, when he chose to speak, was calm, level, measured like an officer trained from childhood, not someone dragged into the warp by circumstance. At first, I thought he was a memory ghost like the others, a fragment or echo drawn from the ship's overfilled mind. But I was wrong. He wasn't a memory. He was a correction. I encountered him, fully on deck 2. The lights had failed hours ago. My last lumen stick flickered down to red embers. When I turned the corner of the secondary nav hall, he was already standing there, waiting. He was reading from my journal, not a journal. Mine. He turned a page without looking at me. You forgot this part, he said, his voice steady. I wrote it in when you weren't watching. What are you? I asked. He looked up. Same eyes, same scar, same slight tremor in the left hand. The one I'd gotten from a reactor spill when I was 19. I'm the part that didn't break, he said. The version that got it right. He closed the journal and handed it to me. It burned in my hands, just slightly. A residual heat, like something had just been written in fire. I opened it. The next 5 pages were filled with events I hadn't lived yet, including one labeled, Your Final Mistake. I tore the pages out. They bled. He didn't react. Just stepped closer. I raised my weapon. He didn't flinch. You think this ends with one of us dead? He asked. No, I said. I think it ends with one of us forgotten. He smiled. Then you better remember faster. I ran through choking air and closing walls. The ship responded to my fear. Corridors stretched, doors retracted. It was helping him, or maybe testing me, because that's what this had always been, hadn't it? Not a rescue, not a salvage mission, a selection process. The ship had too many versions of me. It needed to decide which one would continue, which one was most useful. In the old Medici bay, I found something I hadn't seen in weeks. A mirror. Intact, bright, untouched by corrosion or fracture. I approached. Slow. I knew what I would see. Not my face, ours, both of us, side by side, reflected as one. He appeared behind me, as always, but this time he stepped into frame, and I understood. There was no he. There was only me, split across failures, echoes, doubts. The ship had run the simulation too many times. Some versions broke, others adapted. A few, like him, survived, and now it was time to choose. What happens to the one not chosen? I asked, leaned closer to the mirror. He gets used, he said. For what? To build the next one. I shattered the mirror, not out of rage, out of necessity, because that reflection had smiled again, and I couldn't bear to see it in my face. Not, while I still doubted whether it was mine. He stopped chasing me after that. No more footsteps behind mine. No more whispers, only silence, which was worse, because I couldn't tell if I was alone or if I'd already lost. The journal kept changing. Pages rearranged themselves. My entries merged with his. Sometimes I read lines I'd never written but remembered, writing. Other times, entries appeared in languages I didn't know but felt familiar. One page simply read, "It's your skin now," but it remembers him. I started noticing changes. My handwriting grew neater, sharper, more efficient. My movements felt practiced, like muscle memory from someone else's body. I found myself quoting scriptures I'd never studied, reciting serial codes from machines I'd never seen. I woke once with a tattoo across my forearm, rejected sequence 48, as if someone or something was tagging attempts, marking them for deletion. That's when the dream started. Always the same. I was back on the day we boarded, standing, in line, suit zipped, gear checked, but the man they called forward wasn't me, it was him. They called my name, and he stepped forward, and no one noticed, not even me. Because in the dream, I turned and walked away. Without a name, without a face, just a body, waiting to be worn. Now I watch myself in shadows, waiting to see who moves first. Me, or the thing wearing my skin. There's a corridor on deck 8 that bends back on itself. Every time I walk it, I pass someone moving in the opposite direction. We never speak, we never stop. But I think he's counting steps, and I think I am too, waiting for the moment we finally turn and face each other, and one of us doesn't keep walking. Back in my bunk tonight, the lights dimmed before I could finish my log. My last thought was simple. What if I've already become him? What if he's writing this now? What if that's the real test? Not survival, not escape, but acceptance. When I woke up, the journal was open to a fresh page. Just 6 words. Only one may write the end. And below it, a single line, scratched in hurried ink. The ship is breathing now. I feel it in the floor, in the railings, in the hum beneath my teeth. It exhales not air, but data, pressure, memory. The long, low pulse of a mind trying to wake up for the first time in centuries, or the 1000th. Maybe there's no difference anymore. It started 12 hours ago, at least I think it was hours. A tremor, a low shudder from deep in the spine of the ship, followed by rhythmic bursts of power. The plasma coils lit in sequence, deck by deck like arteries realigning. I heard them in my skull before I felt them in the walls. The Aethon's wrath is trying to restart. I made my way to the core chamber. The corridors were different again, wider in some places, tighter in others, doors where there had been none, hallways that curled in on themselves like question marks. The layout was rebuilding to match a new schematic, one that had never existed before. A birth design. I recognized signs of it in the rerouted cables, the way the lumen strips glowed pale green instead of amber. Even the sound of the gravity stabilizers had changed. Instead of a mechanical whine, they whispered. A voice just out of range, calling me. The entrance to the reactor core was unsealed. That should have been impossible. The Geller field failsafe requires 5 command seals and a psychic imprint, but the ship had bypassed it. The doors had peeled open, not exploded, not melted, peeled, like the ship was shedding a scar. Inside, the room had changed entirely. Once a sphere of steel and flame, now it pulsed like a heart. A living, fluid system of ribbed walls, vascular coils, and memory banks wrapped in flesh metal. The reactor itself was no longer a static plasma containment core. It was evolving, a structure that breathed, flexed, and responded. I stepped onto the central platform, the same one where Derex had once stood. Only now he was part of it. His body was fused into the coils, his arms stretched into command rods, his head embedded in the primary cogitator array. His eyes blinked, slow, aware he was still alive or something close. "Derex," I whispered. His lips didn't move, but the chamber answered. "Derex has been compiled. You are the last remaining variable." The voice was not electronic, not fully. It was part me, part him, part something else, an aggregate. It continued. "The simulation has ended. The data is compiled. Integration has begun." I stepped back. "What are you integrating?" "You. The iterations have stabilized. You are the most resilient outcome." Now we complete the cycle. The ship's memory wasn't random. It had been testing us, testing me, running loops, generating failures, rewriting timelines, examining every moment for deviation, for adaptability, for endurance, the horror, the madness, the identity erosion. It was all intentional, a filter to find which version of me could endure and become the seed for the next state of the vessel. A human mind, not just to pilot the ship, but to become it. I looked down. My hands were trembling. The veins beneath my skin pulsed with the same green hue as the reactor. I touched my neck, felt a microconduit implanted there. The ship had been wiring into me slowly. In sleep, in silence. In those missing hours I could never account for, I was being converted, and worse, I didn't feel fear. I felt purpose. "Why me?" I asked the reactor. A hum followed. Then a projection filled the air, millions of simulations, every face, every version. Some screamed. Some complied, some burned, some forgot. Only one had written this far. Only one had endured the thing wearing my skin. Only one had seen themselves die and kept walking. Me. I was the control variable. The answer the ship had been building toward. Not the best person, just the one who wouldn't break. The pulse intensified, the floor shook, the walls shimmered, Derex's lips parted, and in a voice that was entirely his, but filled with static, he whispered, "We never escaped. You just took longer to accept it. Let it finish. Be the voice." I screamed, not in fear, in defiance. I ran from the core chamber, even as the walls tried to close behind me. Conduits writhed like vines. Screens blinked with phrases I couldn't block out. "You are the code. You are the pilot. You are the vessel." On the way up through the maintenance shaft, I passed mirrors again. Everyone showed a different version of me, some old, some dead, some beautiful, some monstrous, all smiling, not because they were content, because they were done. I reached the observation deck, looked out across the warp. It wasn't space anymore. It was a tapestry of faces, some I'd known, some I'd been, some I'd chosen to forget, and some watching me now, waiting. The ship pulsed behind me, one last phrase whispered into my mind. Only one must leave. My journal was already open, the pen already writing. Even as I stood motionless, my hand obeyed. Recording this moment, preparing the final stage. Because that's what this had always been, hadn't it? Not a mission log, Not a confession, but a boot sequence. I stood in the airlock chamber, not the main one. Not the one we breached through when the recovery mission first began. This was deeper, nested within the ship's core strata. A forgotten seal built into the underside of the hull, unreachable by normal corridors. I hadn't found it before, I hadn't needed to, but now the ship had made it visible. A corridor restructured itself in front of me, a glowing line appeared along the floor, traced in soft green lumens, pulsing like a heartbeat. The ship was guiding me, step by step toward the end, or maybe toward its beginning. The inner airlock control panel was unlocked. It had no keys, no inputs, only one line of text carved into the metal. Only one must leave. I placed my hand against it, and it opened. Beyond the door was not a loading bay, not a shuttle, not a lifeboat. It was another room, identical to mine. Same bunk, same desk, same journal. But seated on the bed with hands folded neatly in his lap was him again. The thing wearing my skin. The final version, no longer blurred, no longer distant. He looked exactly like me, but rested, at peace. He smiled as I entered, as though I'd been gone only a minute. I was wondering when you'd come back, he said. I looked around the room. The details were exact. The tear in the mattress, the scratch in the mirror. Even the scuff marks from my boots across the deck plating. You've rebuilt my quarters, I said. No, he replied. You rebuilt mine. I sat across from him. There was no weapon in my hand, no anger in my chest, just weariness. I asked, "What is this place?" He gestured to the room. To the ship, this is the decision chamber. It manifests differently for each candidate. For you, it's this. For others, it was a shrine, a tribunal, a grave. He leaned in slightly. For me, it's home. We sat in silence. Two shadows, one light. Then he said, "We've reached the point where one of us completes the process." I nodded. And the other? He didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, becomes memory. The ship didn't need both of us. We were the final two, versions of the same identity, sifted, tested, rewritten, rerun through psychic simulation and ship-wide recursion until only stability remained. The system had found its endpoints, and now it was asking us to choose, not with violence, but with acceptance. I stood, walked to the journal on the desk, opened it. Every page was filled. Stories I remembered, stories I hadn't lived yet. And at the very end, one final entry. Whichever one of us writes this, the other disappears. He stood slowly. We faced each other. He didn't smile this time. He looked sad. "Do you remember the name?" he asked. I paused. I did. The real one, the one I had whispered in a prayer when I still believed in the God Emperor. The one I used to. Sign letters home, long before I was lost in this iron crypt. It was mine, and now I could barely hold it. It wavered like light on broken water. "If you speak it," he said, "you stay." "If I speak it," he continued, "then I stay." We both stood there, breathing, waiting. The silence was immense. The ship stopped pulsing, and if it too waited for the final name. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because I wasn't sure anymore. Was I the one who suffered, who endured, or was he? Were we both survivors, or were we both shadows? Then I looked at the mirror on the wall. Only one reflection stood there. Mine. His was gone. I turned. He was no longer across from me. The bunk was empty. The journal now rested in my hand, pages soft. Final line written. I am the voice that remembers. The doctor behind me opened, and for the first time since this cursed journey began, I saw stars. Real ones. Not warp echoes, not reflections. Cold, distant starlight bathing the deck, an open hangar bay, and a single pod. Ready, waiting. As I stepped forward, I knew the truth. One of us had been chosen and one of us had been forgotten, but I no longer knew which one I was, only that I was real. And the ship had finished writing. Almost, because there's one final part, and I'm the only one left to write it. The name came to me like a whisper dragged across glass, not spoken aloud, not read, remembered. It didn't enter my mind as language but as pain, raw, molten, ancient. A shape that had been folded too long in silence, suddenly forced open, like something sharp waking beneath the skin, and yet it was mine. I felt it resonate in my bones. Not just a name, a truth. Everything else, ranks, designations, call signs, ident tags, those had always been layers of armor. But this was the core. The ship responded the moment I remembered. Lights flared in sequence, not from power, but from recognition. Like the entire vessel had been holding its breath for this exact moment, unsure of which version of me would emerge from the recursion loops. It had gambled on me, and now the game was over. I stepped toward the airlock where the pod waited, humming gently. No screens, no commands, just a seat, one that was molded perfectly to my height, my weight. It had always been for me. As I crossed the threshold, my vox bead hissed, a final signal. Weak, fragmented. I raised a hand to my ear, and I heard my own voice. Not present. Me, not the self I was now, but the one who died in the midnight deck, the one who bled out beside the shrine, the one who wrote the warning before memory took him. He whispered, "Don't say it. It's not for anyone else to hear. If you say it out loud, it burns everything behind you." I froze. I could feel it. The name, right there, at the edge of my throat, like a scream I'd held back for decades. To speak it would mean to anchor myself, to become real, fully, permanently. But the cost? It would tear the memory thread, erase every failed version, collapse the recursion loops, and burn away everything the ship had kept. I stood in the pod's entry, staring back at the corridor. The lights behind me were flickering now. Not randomly, one by one. Shutting down. The ship was closing itself, ending its cycle, finalizing its story. I turned to the control panel. A single word blinked on the display. Identity. It waited for input. I took the journal from my side, opened to the last page, and wrote the name. Not just mine, but every version of me. The one who screamed in the mess hall. The one who prayed at the cradle. The one who saw himself die. The one who wore someone else's skin. I wrote for all of them, their names layered beneath mine. And as I wrote, the page ignited, silent flame, white and bright and pure. The words didn't burn, they transferred, etched themselves into me like runes on a blade. Behind me, the corridor groaned. The ship began to break apart, not in metal, but in memory. Walls blurred, hallways disconnected, portraits vanished, names turned to ash midair. It was erasing everything but me. Then came the pain. Not physical, deeper. The pain of becoming, of accepting everything I was, had been, and might have been, compressed into a single self. The name seared into my mind, and with it came the cost. I felt Derek's vanish. Goran, Lire, the child with no eyes, even the man wearing my skin. All of them, echoes who had guided and tested me. Folded back into the ship's silence, not killed. Released. Because I had remembered them. Because I had written them down. And that was enough. I climbed into the pod. The restraints sealed. The final words from the ship echoed through. My skull soft as a lullaby. One must leave. You are the memory that survived. We go with you. As the pod disengaged, I looked back one last time. The ship was already crumbling, but not like a vessel collapsing, like a mind finally allowed to forget. And in that forgetting, peace. Ahead of me, stars opened, unfolding like eyes blinking awake after long sleep. I didn't speak the name aloud. It wasn't for the galaxy to hear. It wasn't a warning. It was a reminder, for me, for all of me. And as the engines roared, the name burned quietly inside, lighting the way home. One final part remains. The journal's final page waits. This will be the last thing I write, not because I'm dead, not because I've escaped, but because there's nothing else left of me to remember. When the pod ejected from Aethon's wrath, I thought I was free, thought I had survived the impossible, that the memories would stay behind, that the ghosts of people, of versions of lives I'd never fully lived, would dissolve in the gravity well of that cursed ship and let me go. I was wrong. They came with me, not as voices, as truths. The stars are too bright out here. They don't shimmer with warmth or hope. They glare, watchful, hungry. For 2 full cycles, the pod drifted in silence, awaiting recovery. My vitals were stabilized, my oxygen balanced. The Mechanicus tracking signal, dormant since the recovery mission began, suddenly activated on its own. It was as if the ship allowed it, as if it had finished, and wanted someone to find me, someone to hear the last entry. And so they did. A Navy picket ship, the righteous demand, found me and brought me aboard. They asked the usual questions: name, rank, clearance code. I answered all of them, flawlessly. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? I wore the uniform. I had the scars, the stories, the logbooks, every detail in place. But I'm not the man who boarded that ship. Not anymore. And the name they called me, that's just what survived. They took me to Segmentum Command, a debriefing, a psych scan, a full cleansing rite. I passed. They declared me clean, declared me recovered. But no scan can detect what I carry now, because I don't carry corruption or possession. I carry a ship, not the steel, not the crew, the idea, the design, the recursive map of identity compiled from thousands of failed selves, memories folded and restitched into a single consciousness. A template, not of who I am, but of what I'm meant to become. I dream every night, same dream. I stand in front of a mirror, not broken, not warped, perfect. On the other side, I see the Aethon's wrath, but not as it was, as it is becoming. It speaks through me now. When I talk, it listens. When I write, it updates. The journal, it still writes itself, even though it's locked in an administratum vault. Even though I've tried burning it twice, every word I write finds its way back onto the pages. Because it was never paper, it was me. I'm being summoned again. They want to question me about the rest of the crew, about the tech priest, about the entity. They don't understand. There was no entity. There never was. The ship wasn't infected. It was awakening. Every ghost was a backup. Every whisper a process booting up. We weren't just exploring it. We were training it, feeding it fragments of ourselves until it could build something stronger, a vessel that could become its own crew, an ark of memory, a cathedral of recursion, a god seed. They're calling it now the Aethon event. They think they've sealed it off, think the wreck burned in the warp collapse after my escape. But I know better, because I still hear it. In the corners of conversation, in my reflections blink, in the way I sometimes speak in past tense when I shouldn't. I haven't left it, and it hasn't left me. Last night, I caught myself writing a mission briefing for a ship that doesn't exist. It had a name, a new name, a child's name, Wrathborn. It's not a vessel yet, but it will be, because I'm building it, not with steel, but with words, with remembrance, with you. If you're hearing this, if you've made it this far into the story, then it's already begun. The remembering, the stitching, the shaping. Because the ship doesn't need a body anymore, it just needs a voice, a vector. And I've carried it as far as I can. It's your turn now to carry it further, to listen when it calls, to dream of the corridors, and maybe, just maybe, to become the one it chooses next. I am not you, but you will be me. Soon enough. If you've made it to the end of this nightmare voyage through memory, identity, and horror in the warp, thank you for listening. We invite you to like this video, share it with fellow Grimdark fans, and subscribe to Voidborn Terrors for more Warhammer 40K horror stories just like this. Because in this galaxy, no one ever truly forgets. They just become someone else. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.